Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The first grain shipment to world markets anchors in Turkish waters.
Very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 3rd of August, and this is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Mark, and here's what's leading the news this morning.
These are live pictures being broadcast this morning. The first grain shipment to leave Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion has anchored off the coast of Istanbul, raising hopes for an easing of the global food crisis.
The US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has spoken to the Taiwanese parliament, describing the nation as one of the freest societies in the world. But China has responded to her visit by announcing large-scale military drills and missile tests.
Voting in the Conservative leadership race will be delayed by more than a week after GCHQ warned that cyber attacks could affect the voting system.
And Princess Charlotte stealing the show at the Aquatic Centre yesterday as she visited the Commonwealth Games with her parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge.
And in the afternoon, star swimmer Adam Peaty ended his campaign on a high note yesterday, winning gold in the men's 50-metre breaststroke.
And you can join any of our discussions, don't forget, by emailing us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews.
So our top story this morning, and breaking in the last few moments, the first few images have emerged of that very first shipment carrying all-important grain out of Ukraine to the world market. It's just anchored off the coast of Istanbul in the past few hours, raising hopes of an easing of the global food crisis.
Yes, the ship, the Razoni, is carrying some 26,000 tonnes of grain. It's the first ship carrying food to leave the port of Odessa in the Black Sea since the Russian invasion.
Well, Ukrainian President Zelensky has welcomed the news, stating that the goal now must be regularity, with boats leaving every day.
Let's get more now from Odessa, indeed, where the shipment departed. Hannah Shelest is the director of the security programme at the Ukrainian prison. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Much relief, I guess, that this has actually managed to navigate the mines and all the other things that were possibly put in its way. Does this indicate that more ships will now be able to leave?
First of all, we are very cautious because that is just a testing voyage. And even for it, you need to understand, usually it takes 24 hours to reach from Odessa to Istanbul. It took more than 36 hours to this ship because it left Odessa at 10 o'clock in the morning and reached it only yesterday at 9 p.m. So day and a half. Plus to this, the whole night, the ship was not inspected and waited. Again, that is additional time for the ship owners and the owners of the cargo. All of this is estimated because each hour of the ship not sailing, it is additional money. And as you can see, we have 16 other ships waiting in the ports of Ukraine now already being loaded, but they're not going because they would like to see the whole passage of Bosphorus of this joint inspection procedure to pass to see how it goes. But the mines, yes, you're right. That is one of the biggest risks that is still there. And for the last week, we already had 3 small boats that been targeted by the mines, close not to Odessa port, but a little bit more to the south near the entrance to the Danube River, because some of the ships are going there and many of the ships need to pass that area as well.
Yeah, so clearly a long way to go before this crisis is resolved, but a really significant, I suppose, and poignant moment, seeing the Ranzoni there, that ship just docked outside Istanbul. Just tell us a little bit about what's on board, where it's destined, and, you know, how this is literally a drop in the ocean when it comes to trying to get grain out of Odessa, as you say.
Yes, that is 26,000 of corn, because when we speak that Ukraine is the biggest exporter of grains in the world, we are talking about wheat, we are talking about barley, we are talking about corn, we are talking about sunflower oil, first of all, in addition to many other things, like, for example, coriander. Ukraine is one of the biggest exporters of coriander to South Asia. So all of these are waiting in the ports or on the fields, because now we're in the middle of the harvest season. As we had the last year, the record high harvest, we had approximately 150 million tons of different grains, and 20 million of these tons were still in the ports or in the silos back in February. This ship is just 26,000. You can imagine, what is the necessity, what the capacity that we need. But at the same time, saying that the previous months, all we could export is maximum 1 million ton per month by cars, by lorries, and by rails to the ports of Constanța or to Polish ports. That's definitely 20-30 times less than what annually Ukraine usually exported. So each of the ship, that is additional very big support for the exporters, for sure. But also try to think that this corn is going now to Lebanon. Lebanon is approximately 40% dependent in their import of cereals from Ukraine. The same for Egypt. So when you have 40% of your food supply in terms of grains dependent from one country, and this country is not able to export because of war, you imagine all other consequences in terms of high prices for food, in terms of social economic instability in these countries. So definitely now a lot of countries are really waiting for these ships to leave the ports. But at the same time, we know that Russia has been using these difficult social situations, and as they stole approximately 500,000 tons of Ukrainian grains from occupied region of Kherson, they've been illegally exported it from the Crimean ports. We already have these cases in the as illegal cases against them. They tried to bring these ships to Egypt and to Lebanon, exactly to these countries. And thanks to their governments, they prevented, and they even in Lebanon arrested recently one of the ships with these stolen grains.
Hannah, if you will, what the situation is like in Odessa in terms of, you know, the threat, the fear, how life is. I mean, I was hearing yesterday the UN Refugee Council saying 10 million Ukrainians have now fled the country, crossed the border out of Ukraine, trying to get to safety. What's it like for you there at the moment?
Definitely, but when you speak about these 10 millions, you need to remember that at least 3 million already returned back to Ukraine, because Ukrainians don't want to be refugees. As soon as some territories are liberated, like around Kyiv, they are trying to return back to their lives. But at the same time, especially families with very small kids, it is very difficult for them, because you can hear the air raids several times per day. You can hear the work of the air defense. And if for adults, that's something more or less what you can stay. Definitely depends on the scope and depends on your nervous system. But at the same time, for kids or for the elderly people, that is very, very difficult psychologically. In Odessa, it's very surreal because you have markets, supermarket shops being opened, people walking, trying to take a cup of coffee outside. But as soon as you hear the air raid, you feel this panic and nervous, and people are trying to hide, or all of them need to get out from the shops because it is just for their safety reasons. For us, we are really looking what is happening in Mykolaiv. That is the nearest city which is under attack right now, 100 kilometers, daily shelling, heavy shelling. And we have more and more internally displaced people coming from there to Odessa. Only in Odessa, we have approximately 30,000 people now who fled the other regions that are under the attack. And we are also under the attack of the missiles. Just after this grain deal from which we started, less than 24 hours, Odessa port was targeted by 4 cruise missiles from the Russian ships in the Black Sea. And 2 of them, unfortunately, reached the bursars. So you understand that there is no place in Ukraine where you can say, OK, here I'm totally safe.
Yeah. OK, well, listen, Hannah Shelest, thank you very much for giving us that picture of life in Ukraine at the moment and an update on the Ranzoni grain ship we can see in the shot there, having just docked outside Istanbul this morning. Good to talk to you from Odessa this morning. Hannah Shelest, Director of Security Programmes at Ukrainian Prism. Thank you.
We'll keep you updated on the situation. Of course, the inspections will be continuing on that ship and indeed the other shipments that now may follow in its wake. But let's take a look now at how the Russian embargo on the grain leaving Ukraine has been affecting people here in the UK. Now, our East of England reporter Ed Crawford with one of the businesses that's been affected, joining us live from Suffolk's Stowe Market. Ed, good morning to you. And it's affecting manufacturing, food manufacturing across the board.
Good morning. Yes, well, I'm in Stowe Market this morning, and Stowe Market is far away from Odessa, but the conflict in eastern Ukraine does have far-reaching implications, and it's got implications on bakeries across the country. And that's why I've come to Palmer's Bakery in Stowe Market, which is 153 years old today, and I'm joined by the master baker, Kieran Palmer.
Hello there.
Kieran, can you tell me a bit about grain prices? What are you seeing day to day?
We're seeing prices across the board rising all the time. Wheat prices for us, for flour, has gone up twice this year, and we're told it's going up again in the next few months. We're seeing fats, fruits, sultanas, all prices going up, along with oil and electricity, so it's a perfect storm.
Certainly is a perfect storm. It's an economic crisis mixed in with an actual conflict. Now, Ukraine is one of the largest wheat producing countries in the world, produces roughly 10% of the world's wheat. A lot of bakers have been saying to me they expect there'll be further price hikes in September when the harvest comes in. Have you heard much about that? What's your predictions going forwards?
The millers have told us they will go up, but they haven't told us by what. I mean, we mainly have English wheat, but because of the Ukrainian situation, it's causing a knock-on demand on the English wheat. So we're waiting to find out towards the end of September.
Of course, because it's not just the war in Ukraine, it's also the sanctions on Russia that have an impact both on Russian citizens and European citizens. And, of course, that's driving up fertiliser prices, which makes English wheat more expensive as well. So I guess you're seeing that as a result in some respects.
Yes, everything's going up. I mean, butter, for instance, was £15 a box last week, and this week it's gone to 33. So who knows where the prices are going to go, but we just have to take each day as it comes, really.
Well, the prices certainly have gone overboard, but it is great news to hear that the first ship has left Odessa full of grain, and hopefully normal service can be resumed and Ukraine can start exporting wheat regularly. But on that note, we're going to hand back to the studio.
OK, Ed, thank you very much indeed. Look, it's not just the high street, it's also the farming industry that's been affected by all of this as well. Let's speak to Tom Firmer, who is a farmer, joins us this morning from Kent. A very good morning to you. Looks like you're out in your fields already bright and early. Listen, tell us how all of this has affected you in the last 6 months since war broke out, and what you hope, perhaps, this first grain ship leaving from Odessa might signify in terms of how things could change for all of us.
Well, earlier in the year, we had a lot of problems with availability of fertilizer. Luckily, that was merited with a warm winter, so crops were yielding perhaps a bit better than they would normally. But the things in Ukraine really pushed the prices up for us, which got us out of a bit of a hole there. Unfortunately, sorry, I think I'm disconnected.
Can you still hear us there, Tom?
Looks like he got an incoming call or something happening.
Yeah.
Tom,
let's just see if we can get back to him. But Tom, I think we have lost the signal. But Tom clearly was in the middle of one of his wheat fields, because he's in the middle of the wheat harvest at the moment. I guess the only positive thing about this is that some of our British farmers may be able to get a slightly higher price for their wheat, which they can put back into the system, because, as you were saying, fertiliser and all the other sort of costs of production are really shot up.
Exactly, but whether or not they see that as a profit or just covering their costs remains to be seen. Look, if we can get back to Tom, we will. But for now, let's bring you up to date with the time at 6:13 with all the latest headlines this morning.
Well, Rishi Sunak may have lost ground in the race to be the new Conservative leader, because a new YouGov poll is showing support for the former Chancellor dropping from some 31% to 26% amongst Tory party voters. But the ballot delivery delay to those members could give him more time to impress his party before they vote, because the Daily Telegraph this morning reporting the Tories have stalled their vote over security concerns with the process.
China has placed its military on high alert in response to the US House Speaker's visit to Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi travelled to Taipei despite a warning from the Chinese president that it would undermine relations. After landing, she said Taiwan's democracy is under threat, and the US remains committed to supporting the island's defence. The People's Liberation Army says it will conduct joint military operations and test missiles in the sea east of Taiwan during her visit.
Well, let's ask, is it safe to go back in the water, or do we need a bigger boat? That's the other line you remember from that film. A snorkeler suffering a suspected shark attack off the coast of Cornwall. Well, the swimmer suffered a leg injury after the encounter near Penzance. Blue Shark Snorkel Trips, the company that organised the tour, said the incidents were extremely rare, and they were in continued talks with shark experts as to what may have happened. I bet they are.
That story has been picked up by the papers this morning, and it is one of those subjects that it just always captures the public's imagination, doesn't it? And there's all those theories about what you would do if you encountered a shark.
Yeah.
Do you punch it in the nose?
Poke it in the eye?
Or poke it in the eye?
A splash on the water. Well, I guess if you're under the water, that's the difficult. You know, the shark's thinking, oh, that's a tasty meal, because it's a seal or something like that.
That's a McDonald's snack as far as they're concerned. And there's plenty of seals around the coast of the UK. So is this something that, we can expect to see more of as sea temperatures
Yeah, I mean,
rise?
you've reported from the southwest of England. It was always basking sharks, which are huge, seen, and everyone starts panicking, but they only eat plankton. But a blue shark, which is the one involved, I mean, that's a different animal completely.
Yeah, and the lady involved, she suffered leg injuries, but she was at pains in some of the interviews I've been reading this morning to say it wasn't the shark's fault. They were in the shark's territory. As it said in that story we were just reading, this was Blue Shark Snorkel Tours. They'd gone to
Right, so it wasn't that the shark arrived, that they'd actually gone in?
Yes, this wasn't a swimmer just off the beach. This was actually going to look for the shark.
Yeah, I mean, savages may be going a bit too far, the Sun's headline there, I think, but still not the thing that you want when you're having a paddle in the water.
Nightmarish, isn't it? But I don't think we're quite at the Sharm el-Sheikh level of danger just yet. Right. On to other news now, and Archie Battersbee's Battersbee's life support is set to be switched off at 11 o'clock this morning. It comes as the parents of the brain-damaged 12-year-old lost a Supreme Court bid to block the withdrawal of his life-sustaining treatment.
Yes, a difficult story, of course, for everyone concerned. For the parents, last night Archie's mum, Holly Dance, had told reporters that their legal team would be submitting an application to the Human Court of Human Rights this morning, the European Court, in another last-ditch attempt to postpone the withdrawal of life support.
Well, let's speak to our reporter, Ellie Costello. She's outside the Royal London Hospital for us, where Archie is being treated. Ellie, the anguish that the family is quite publicly suffering is difficult for everyone to witness. Day after day, it seems they're trying another legal avenue. Bring us up to date then. You know, the highest court in the land here in the UK saying that it is time for them to turn off that machine this morning, but they're now appealing to the European Court of Human Rights.
Yes, this is the legal case of every parent's worst nightmare, isn't it? It's about switching off the life support of a very much loved child in a coma. And Archie Battersbee's life support machine is set to be switched off at 11 o'clock this morning. That is unless his parents can submit another legal challenge today. Now, this all started 4 months ago when Archie was found unconscious in his home in Essex with ligature marks around his neck, and his parents believe that he was taking part in some sort of online challenge, and he was taken here to the Royal London Hospital, and he has remained in a coma ever since. He hasn't regained consciousness. Now, the hospital here say that there is no possibility of recovery and that Archie is brainstem dead. They would like his life support machine to be switched off. His parents believe with every fibre of their being that their son is still very much alive. They want more time for Archie. That case has been heard twice in the High Court. Judges have ruled that it's best that his life support machine is switched off. It was then appealed by his parents, taken to the Court of Appeal. It was stood up there that his life support machine should be switched off. And yesterday in the Supreme Court, it was heard there, the highest court in the land, and they agreed with all previous judgments that it was in Archie's best interests that his life support machine be switched off. Now, we do know that Archie's parents have always said they will fight this till the bitter end. We know there's one more legal avenue that they are going to take. They want to pursue the the European Court of Human Rights. They want Archie to have a natural death. Now, the legal challenge from Archie's parents has now changed from not whether or not the life support machine should be switched off, but where Archie should die. They would like Archie to be moved from the hospital behind us to a hospice, and they are asking the European Court of Human Rights for the ability to do that. So it does look as though they're going to submit a last-minute application this morning. They're going to aim to have it in by 9 a.m. Remember, that life support machine is supposed to be switched off at 11 a.m, so it really is coming down to the wire here. If they can get that legal application in for 9 o'clock, then that will probably lead to another anguished wait for the parents of Archie Battersbee to see what the European Court of Human Rights rules.
Thank you very much indeed. And of course, we'll see what happens with that 11 o'clock deadline this morning, and indeed what's decided by that European Court. But thank you very much indeed for updating us.
Yeah, and you know, our hearts just go out to the family, but also all of the doctors involved. Hugely distressing
still caring
for everybody. Look, stay with us. We're going to take a break. After that, we'll be in Birmingham. We'll have all the latest for you from the Commonwealth Games, including some success again, thank goodness. Adam Peaty reigning supreme once again with a bit of a comeback. That's after your forecast.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Lots more still to come on our packed show this morning. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives in the States, has met with the President of Taiwan, somewhat controversially, in the past few hours. We'll find out how China is reacting. That's at 6:45.
Yeah, warning about any British MPs going to Taiwan as well. Also, at 8:45, speaking to a doctor who successfully separated conjoined twins with shared fused brains by using virtual reality.
Yeah, he's described this as a man on the moon moment when it comes to this kind of surgery.
Yeah, was it 31 hours? That's the opposite.
Surgery, and
incredible stuff.
The twins doing well, so we're really lucky to have him straight from Great Ormond Street. Remember, get involved in all of our discussions this morning. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
So, day 6 for all our competitors at the Commonwealth Games continuing in Birmingham. 30 goals up for grabs today, from biking to the shot put. Our Midlands reporter Will Hollis joining us from Birmingham because, of course, it was that swimming pool or the big splash, maybe, that we can say Adam Peaty made.
Yes, of course. Good morning. Yeah, right now where we are is the NEC. We're a little bit outside of Birmingham City right now, about a 20-minute drive away. There's a little bit of driving to get to some of these locations. Some of them are a little bit further out of the city, but much of it is in walking distance. This is where we're going to be expecting lots of interesting things to happen a little bit later. But just as you said, last night, a lot of the attention was, of course, on the swimming pools at Sandwell Aquatic Centre, just on the other side of the city. That's because Adam Peaty was back in the pool, and that result that we really wanted to see, that comeback after the shock defeat on Sunday, did come to us. So let's just remind you of what happened on Sunday. Adam Peaty, one of the most decorated medalists in this competition, as well as the world of swimming. He came fourth in that competition. Everybody was expecting him to clean up, to go for gold, but he didn't perform. Somebody else who did, though, was James Wilby, who got a gold. So everybody was a little bit disappointed. Everybody was a little bit shocked. But then Adam Peaty came back with ferocious style in the 50 metres breaststroke. One of the things that he said was that he was a little bit disheartened. He wasn't really in the right place after that first match, but then he decided he could either fight or not fight, and he chose to fight. And now that he's got that last medal, the gold in the 50 metre breaststroke, he said that he can retire quite happily and move on to maybe something that you don't end up in the pool so much for. Maybe he'll be training on the sidelines for the future of the next Commonwealth and Olympic stars.
Well, anyone who watches the programme regularly will know that I always love these sporting events, even more when we get a little glimpse of this little one. Princess Charlotte on the front of a couple of the broadsheets this morning, and she looked like she was having a fabulous time yesterday.
Yeah, people from across the country, across Birmingham, as well as from around the world are here to see the athletes. But when you see a little piece of royalty in the crowd, whether it's over on the stands next to you, or even if it's just a picture or a video, it really is quite special. So this was Princess Charlotte, 7 years old. She's the second one after Prince George, and then just before Prince Louis. So she was in the crowd with Kate and William enjoying the swimming at the Sandwell Aquatic Centre. I think it was the 1,500 metres for Luke Turley. She was seen in photos with a thumbs up, really enjoying it, even rolling her eyes after her dad made a comment, probably a dad joke or some sort of overly complicated explanation that would just be quite simple to explain even to a 7-year-old girl. So yeah, really exciting for a lot of people to see the royalty here taking part. We saw them opening the games through Prince Charles, and we've also seen the Duke and Duchess of Wessex. So lots of people around for people to enjoy rather than just watching the swimming.
Photographer's dream, isn't
Well,
it?
exactly, yeah. And who can blame Dad for trying to mansplain?
Yeah.
But there we go. 30 goals up for grabs today, no less. What should we be looking out for today?
Yes, well, the difficulty of whenever I'm here there are so many athletes for England and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland as well, that sometimes you feel like you don't get to name everybody. But the one to really watch out for that I think is going to be a really good performance is, of course, Emily Campbell. Tokyo 2020, that was actually held in the year 2021. She got a silver in the weightlifting, the first British woman to get a medal in the weightlifting. So that was fantastic to see. She's going to be where we are today inside of the NEC for the 87 kg weightlifting category. I'm a little bit biased because she's from my hometown in Nottingham as well, so I know that a lot of people in Nottingham will be behind her, celebrating her, and I think she's certainly the one to watch. There's also boxing as well, and a whole variety of things. So if you just flick on the telly, you'll be sure to see something that will excite you.
You're absolutely right. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Look, do stay with us at home. We're going to be going through your newspapers this morning with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon straight after this. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 6:32. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines.
Boris Johnson going on his summer holidays today until the end of the week. That's only less than 5 weeks now before he'll step down as Prime Minister. Downing Street saying Mr Johnson will remain in charge of the country whilst he's away and be updated as required. He and his wife Carrie celebrating their wedding last weekend, but not known whether this holiday is an official honeymoon or not.
Archie Battersbee's parents say they'll submit an application to the European Court of Human Rights in a bid to postpone the withdrawal of his life support. The 12-year-old's treatment's due to be stopped at 11 o'clock this morning. Archie's been in a coma since April.
We'll keep you updated, of course, on that throughout the morning. In other news, Lloyds Bank is warning it's seen a surge in football ticket scams ahead of the new season. Says reported cases have gone up by more than 2/3 in the first half of the year compared to last year. Victims have lost just over £400 on average.
OK, let's go through your newspapers this morning. We've got the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, joining us, as often he does, on a Wednesday, and broadcaster and journalist Claire Muldoon, who also does on a Wednesday. David, should we start with the Times? Lots of the papers covering this pretty unusual visit, it has to be said, by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, given that she doesn't have the permission of the Biden administration, and she's going under her own steam, and it's also met with widespread condemnation from Beijing as well. Is this ill-advised?
No, not at all ill-advised. America is blessed with an extremely weak and potentially senile president. The Chinese have no claim on Taiwan. They've never occupied Taiwan. It is not their territory. But they think they can bully their way into getting what is really a hegemony over the whole of the Southeast Asia. And they begin with a perceived fear on the part of the Americans of actually dealing with Taiwan. And it's well covered, actually, in Mark Arman's piece in the Mail, where the case against what Pelosi is doing is described as a noble stance, but she's dousing the fiery breath of the Chinese dragon with petrol. What is the future of the world if we're frightened of China?
Right, on that, what do we do? Because the Chinese ambassador to the UK has warned, don't send your MPs either, because we'll deal with that as well. I mean, should we actually then take the same stance? Right, yes, we will take the decision to support democracy and wave the flag for that.
Because, look, you look at the Chinese. Now, I was around in Hong Kong in 1997 when it was handed back to China, and everything was done by Chris Patten to try to ensure that the people of Hong Kong were protected and their rights were protected. Chinese have driven a coach and horses through that. You see, the thing about China, it's a big country, but actually it's got a very immature political system. Why has it got an immature political system? Because a man like Xi, who is not doing very well, by the way, but wants to be sort of global leader for life and probably for several other lives.
And wants to be re-elected shortly.
He wants to be re-elected. And he is, we're put in a position where he can argue from a standpoint of arguments that are not tested in a mature democracy with anybody who dares say what they think. And I think at a certain point, particularly with a weak president, other senior people within the American political establishment have got to stand firm, because what is the alternative?
Yes, but you say stand firm. What can she actually achieve? Who really is she? Obviously, we know she's the Speaker of the House of Representatives in the States. She's not the President. She doesn't have the President's backing. She's not another sort of figurehead or
But the President will fall out with her at his peril, and he is not going to be the candidate.
But as
for
you
the
say,
next
this
time.
could actually have consequences, to the, if it's dousing
What are they
flames.
going to do?
Well, I've heard
what are they going to do?
saying
China's got sent out
400
nuclear weapons. That's not to be sneezed at, against America's 5,000. I think what they really, we've got to stop being frightened of the Chinese. We ran away from Hong Kong.
Yeah, and is that the issue that after Ukraine, that our assessment of the world stage now has changed, that we've got to be shown to be taking a stance?
Well, I think the lens that everyone's looking at this is slightly skewed, and I'm wondering if David's got an opinion on the fact of timing of this. Do you think the timing of it, David, has any impact on the state of Ukraine, Russia, and what's happening generally in the world? Because she wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post after she landed, and she also referenced China's actions in Hong Kong, Tibet, and the genocide that China is doing against the Uyghurs.
Yeah, I think that, look, America is a very frustrated place. They've got a weak president who was never, even when he was in his prime, regarded as good enough to be president. Now he's in his dotage, he's president. He's selected a vice president who doesn't seem to be remotely up to the job. And there's a lot of frustration. Look, he will never live down Biden, that dismal evacuation of American forces in Afghanistan. And the Chinese need to understand, as do we all, the American president runs a bit of America. The Congress runs a lot of America. And the fact of the matter is that the senior ranking Democrat, the number 3 in the American political system, has basically shown she doesn't care what Biden thinks, because she has been a bit of an anti-China warrior for a long time.
And interesting that both Pompeo and John Bolton have tweeted their support for what she did, which, you know, from the Republicans.
Just before we move on, a final thought about the UK stance. We talked about the warnings from the Chinese ambassador here in London against us following Pelosi's suit over there. Our Foreign Secretary is obviously quite distracted at the moment, in the middle of a leadership contest, taking her eye off the ball. I mean, is there an actual danger, do you think, that with the situation yesterday with Al-Qaeda leader in Afghanistan, the situation with the Odessa grain ship, and now what's unfolding in
why don't
Taiwan?
they get on with it? You know, they're sending out to a lot of, you know, the Conservative Party has its own geriatrics, and quite a lot of them are members of the Conservative Party.
We'll come to that in a moment, the voting.
So why are they taking... Exactly. Why are they taking so long to sort this out?
What's £7 billion buy you nowadays?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Ask the heads of BP what £7 billion can buy you. This is in the front page of the Mirror, amongst other papers. There's lots of opinion pieces on it, and no doubt our viewers will have a view.
As they fill up their cars
this morning. But listen, look, profits go up, profits go down. BP are harvesting a large amount of money at the moment through profit. But what people really need to understand is the fact that pensions, a lot of pension providers, pension pots, pension funds
invested in oil companies.
Invested into the oil companies. So we can't have it both ways. However, my view is that they are taking an extremely large sum of money at the moment when TSB, Aldi, Iceland have all taken from their profits to give back to their employees. So why can't the fuel companies actually give back to the consumers that are not only their employees, but every single one of us sitting around this table at the moment?
Because there are financial experts that say they've made so much cash, they don't know what to do with it, which is why they've had a share buyback of some $3 billion.
They're also buying back their shares. And some would say that, is that not insider dealing, the fact that they've been able to buy back their shares at a price, either is it predetermined or is it market determined? Who knows?
Why are the Tories so frightened about a windfall tax?
You tell me.
Really?
Well, absolutely. I was always in favour of windfall taxes because circumstances alter cases.
And you know, they can be one-offs. They can actually be tailored to the circumstances.
Of course, Look, we have to accept the fact, don't we, that politics is not really a game for big people anymore. People who are really willing to call the big shots. A lot of these people... I sometimes think, as I watch the leadership debates, a bit like watching a students' union having a sort of fake grown-up debate, mimicking their elders and betters. I hope I'm wrong. I've no particular interest in these people not being up to it. But at the end of the day, you've got to act decisively. BP's not a company to get sentimental about. BP is a company that is going to make a windfall profit. They've had their rough old times, including a lot of misjudgments that they themselves made in China, and they want to hold on to every penny of it. Well, the reason we have a government And the reason that we have a Chancellor is to stop them from doing that. So why doesn't he get on with it?
Exactly.
Why doesn't he get on with it?
Well, that leads us on to the Tory leadership. The Telegraph talking about this hacking warning from GCHQ. The ballot papers were supposed to be arriving on through letterboxes on Monday morning. They haven't arrived. Lots of members were questioning why. They're being told it could be a week before they do arrive. Could that help the ailing Sunak team, do you think?
I don't know. But what it doesn't help is the idea that the Conservative Party, you know, a party that wants to run the nation can't even run a leadership election. And I find that quite frightening.
Well, I mean, isn't that a fair, reassuring thing that the GCHQ have picked up there is this threat of possible, you know, malign involvement from perhaps foreign parties?
But all this was so predictable. And I don't understand why. They had every reason, bearing in mind the extent to which the Tory party has been trespassing on the good nature of the British people with the decline of Boris Johnson and demise of Boris Johnson. And you feel, why are they insisting, when of course they don't have to? A number of leadership elections have not required going out to the membership. The membership is pathetic compared to what it used to be. I mean, people get fed up with this statistic, but even my own little constituency, and I had one of 650 constituencies, we had a membership between 3,000 and 5,000 during my time as the MP for Putney. Now there's 175,000. They keep changing that, by the way.
Yeah, you can't actually get the
175,000 from 650 constituencies. You can do the maths. It's a few hundred. Why are these people going to determine 0.2% of the British people who...
our next Prime Minister.
Our next Prime Minister is completely wrong.
Does anyone else think that September the 5th seems such a long long way away, considering we've had this every single day?
Yeah, what more are they going to say in the next few weeks that we haven't heard already?
And that brings us back to that point about Liz Truss, who does actually have a job to do.
She has a job to do as foreign.
And given that the YouGov poll that's come out today that puts Liz Truss so far ahead of Rishi Sunak, there have to be questions about whether or not Rishi Sunak should feel, do you think, pressure to perhaps bow out, let there be a coronation?
I felt that for some time.
Yeah.
Because the other problem is that, you know, we can't get into a situation where, for instance, Jeremy Hunt ran Boris Johnson quite close. As a result, Jeremy Hunt was never part of Boris Johnson's government. Boris Johnson tested to destruction the idea that when you've got a very weak parliamentary party anyway, some of the people that are quite good you keep out and you end up with a shambolic government.
Yeah.
I mean, a shambolic government with a lot of people totally incapable of discharging their functions.
Well, so you're worried that Rishi Sunak wouldn't go in the cabinet if Liz Truss pushes it too far? I get the sense that if he doesn't win this, he'll be out anyway, he'll be done.
And I think that's a shame because although, I mean, poor Rishi Sunak, I think he will...
Well, he's not very poor.
No, he's not very poor.
I don't know why we go on and on about this so much, though, about his personal wealth. No one gives Jacob Rees-Mogg the same grief or Lord Goldsmith.
Good point. Good point.
But yeah, anyway, I see that. Yeah. But the point is that Rishi Sunak is a grown-up. And there aren't enough grown-ups around. Why get rid of one of the grown-ups you've got?
Yeah. We've talked about legacy from the Lionesses. And we were talking about how wonderful it was to see the kids in Wembley and they were getting involved and we went to football clubs, seeing them on the practice grounds, whatever. But the key element was the schools.
Yes.
And there's
something... It always is, Mark.
Yeah, there's something that you've spotted in the eye that is raising questions.
It's the header. And I think it's a bit of a knee-jerk headline, to be honest with you, because it's only just happened. OK, the women have only just won the football. So much for the legacy, it says here. The Department for Education refuses to give girls equal football and PE despite Lionesses' victory. I mean, we're day 3 post-event. Government says schoolgirls will not be guaranteed same football lessons as boys, but the girls can be offered the chance to play a comparable sport instead, prompting outcry 3 days after the event.
Rounders and netball and all
lacrosse, maybe, or
lacrosse is quite
I don't think they play rounders anymore.
It's been replaced by cricket. I'm sorry, but can I just put my tuppence worth in here? Personally, I wouldn't want equal access to football. It's great that the Lionesses have had this success, and I suppose the opportunity should be there, but I don't know why it should be at the detriment of other sports. I
agree.
I love netball and wouldn't have wanted to have played any other sport.
And hockey.
Yeah, netball, hockey, rounders, athletics, swimming, all those things.
But, you know, we're drowned now in equality.
17 million people are not going to watch the television for any of those sports, and 17 million people watched the European football final.
I think that was because it was a one-off, David, not because I think because we had a good chance of winning, England had a good chance of winning, people wanted to be entertained.
But now they're there.
But I think, to be fair,
I guess the litmus test will be how many people will be watching now the the Women's Super League games that are televised, and when the scheduling will be. That's the other key to it, I think.
Yeah, and netball's, great to watch on TV. If you ever get a chance to watch it, I just think a huge number of people don't actually understand
We're
the
getting
game.
too deeply ingrained in equality, and I think we have to take a step back and move away from it, to be honest with you. Let's move away from it. If girls want to play, give them the ability to play. They've got it. But there's enough sports around for everybody, I think, without this knee-jerk reaction and these statistics that can often spark outcry from people, which is completely uncalled for.
OK, Claire Muldoon, David Mellor, lovely to go through the papers with you. We'll have more from you at about 7:30.
You will indeed.
Thank you very much. Right, time's coming up to 10 to 7.
Yeah, and let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines. The UK looks set to enter perhaps recession, which will hit millions of the most vulnerable households. That's according to the latest data. A report from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research has warned of a three-quarter technical recession, whatever that is, but a relatively shallow one.
An 18-year-old's been charged with the murder of a 16-year-old boy in Somerset. The teenager was found with stab wounds in a car park on Sunday evening. Joshua Del Bono from Frome remains in police custody and he'll appear at Bath Magistrates Court today.
In the sport, Adam Peaty says he's bounced back from being at the lowest of the low as he took home gold in the men's 50 metres breaststroke in his final, perhaps, Commonwealth Games race. It's after his 8-year unbeaten run over 100 metres ended on Sunday with 4th place in that particular race.
Now, as we've been discussing this morning, the US House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, has visited and is in Taiwan and has met with the president there, despite China condemning the trip and threatening military drills.
Well, now the Chinese ambassador to the UK, no less, warning against any British MPs following her example. Let's get the latest reaction from the host of the Spectator's Chinese Whispers podcast, Cindy Yu, joining us in the studio. Thanks for coming in this morning. First of all, to the Pelosi visit, there are people trying to judge, has this done more harm or good? What's your judgment on that?
It's funny because Pelosi this morning couldn't answer that question herself.
Yeah.
So she's been giving a press conference in Taipei, to which some journalists asked, what are you expecting to achieve from this visit? And actually, because the cost has been quite high, China's been carrying out live fire exercises around the strait.
Jets buzzing across the straits.
Exactly. Yeah. And Pelosi actually couldn't answer the question. So I think the problem is that a lot of this is great as a signal of American support and all of that, and everyone should be standing up for freedom and democracy. At the same time, is this really the best way to do it whilst provoking Beijing? And as you were saying earlier, at this time.
Yeah, and I suppose the West's response would be we shouldn't be prevented from doing what we think is right just because we're fearing the wrath of Beijing. That being said, nobody wants to start World War III, and it's an overstated phrase, but I mean, it's not insignificant to see Chinese fighter jets being scrambled yesterday, these military drills now being carried out in the Taiwan Strait. Just give us a sense of the background to all of this, because a lot of comparisons being made with Hong Kong and obviously the British involvement there and China wanting to reclaim it. But this is a different situation altogether on the island of Taiwan.
It's slightly different, but in the root cause, I would say it's the same, which is just the century of humiliation that the Chinese talk about that my country went through under colonial powers, not just the British, but also the Japanese and other forces. And Hong Kong, is one of those places that got returned in 1997. But Taiwan hasn't been reunified in the Chinese mindset. And so it is a reminder to those in Beijing, to President Xi, that his job is not done, essentially. He talks about the great rejuvenation of the Chinese people. You can't greatly rejuvenate the Chinese people without reuniting all of your territory, at least in his mind.
So is there a parallel with Putin? And Xi's looking towards a third term, that he wants to be seen as the strong man, and he's looking at all these legacy issues to, as he would say it, reunite a greater China. And that's a very dangerous thing in geopolitical terms.
Yeah, absolutely it is. There's one difference, though, which is just that Taiwan, it has been a flourishing democracy. Now, I'm not a Russia expert, but Ukraine has had less time being a flourishing independent state. And so the task on China's hands is much tougher. The military task is also much harder because it's an island. You know, China has to be better at joint operations, you know, that land, sea and air operations that it's trying to do better at, but so far hasn't really cracked, really. So it's a much tougher task than just marching over some ground.
Yes, so in many ways, the democratic norms that were established in Hong Kong are not respected by the Chinese, might have to be respected in the case of Taiwan just because they've had longer to establish them.
Well, we'll have to see. I think before what happened to Hong Kong under the national security law over the last few years, there were people in Taiwan saying, you know, look at one country, two systems. That does work for Hong Kong and therefore it can work for us if we were to go back to the People's Republic of China. Now that argument is much harder to make considering what's happened to Hong Kong.
Yeah. A lot of people are thinking, you know, are we in now a new Cold War? And if that is the case, what is the relationship between China and Russia? Because clearly there was an indication that China wanted to pull back after the Ukraine invasion, thinking this could cost us in economic terms if we seem to be too closely allied.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the position has been reversed between the two. You know, China was the junior partner in the original Cold War. Now, you know, Moscow needs Beijing more than Beijing needs Moscow. And I think that's what we've seen because China hasn't had to go support Moscow. Moscow can't force it to do anything, whilst at the same time, you know, Beijing is making the most of the cheaper oil from Russia whilst sitting on the fence on either side. So I think...
It's playing its cards quite cleverly in that case.
Absolutely. It's taking advantage of the situation. And I also think that with the Russian invasion, that China wasn't really warned about it. You can see it was wrong-footed at the beginning from statements from the foreign ministry, from the government. For the first few days, China didn't know what the narrative was. Because until the invasion, it was, oh, this is just America warmongering, this is just...
so a bit of frustration with that, then.
Yeah, and they had egg on their face, essentially, because they didn't see it coming.
And in terms of, you know, Nancy Pelosi's visit and not really being sure quite what she's hoping to achieve, one wonders if any British politicians were to follow suit, who that might be. We've been talking this morning about how the Foreign Secretary is pretty busy at the moment, but we'll have an outgoing Prime Minister who's done very well in the Ukraine situation and got a lot of international praise for that. What do you think would be the response from Beijing if perhaps, say, come September, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson were to make a visit there?
Well, that would be an even bigger story than what we're talking about now, because Nancy Pelosi, after all, is not in the administration, and Boris Johnson would be making a pretty clear statement if he were to do that. I think it would
But would it be quite powerful if he were to do that?
Again, it's the timing, it's what is it practically you're actually hoping to achieve. Everybody knows that the West is on Taiwan's side. It's just a question of how are you going to deliver that message? I do think we could see someone who was a bit more junior, someone like Tom Tugendhat, for example, who's chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He's got an interest in China. He's got a higher profile through the leadership contest. And there has been talk that backbenchers like him might go. And that would be also, I think, a similar level to what we're seeing now. But anyone in the current government or going would, I think, trigger probably the next crisis in the Taiwan Strait.
Very interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Cindy Yu, host of The Spectator's Chinese Whisper podcast.
Back right with you on the latest on the Tory leadership coming up, as well as a Ukrainian MP with the reaction to the first ship carrying Ukrainian grain on the world market arriving off Istanbul.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's a gloomy start for many of us with some rain, but brighter skies are on their way later. Those brighter skies are to the north of a cold front which is currently crossing England and Wales. Along that cold front, thick and low cloud with some early rain. But as the cold front pushes through, brighter skies will appear and a scattering of showers. So a grey start to the day for southern parts of England. The rain clearing southwest England, South Wales in the next few hours, and then that pushes into central and southern parts of England. It turns to showers, I think, and it doesn't quite reach the far southeast, where it does stay dry with increasingly sunny skies later, and the skies brighten across much of the country, but there will be a further showery pulse of rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Temperatures at around average in the north, high teens, low 20s. Further south, 23 or 24 for Cardiff and Exeter, but 28 Celsius for London. And then overnight, clear spells for much of England and Wales. A few more showers coming along for North Wales for a time and North England. But most of the showers will affect Scotland, and some longer spells of rain will cross the country through the night. 11 to 14 Celsius for Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland. 15 or 16 for much of England and Wales, and here it will be a warm start to the day with plenty of sunshine first thing, staying dry for the southern third of the UK with a mixture of bright spells and showers elsewhere. The showers fairly isolated though, I think, for northern England and much of Wales, more frequent for parts of Scotland and the north of Northern Ireland. A cooler day for many, 24 in the southeast, 18 to 22 elsewhere. Friday also sees a return of sunny spells and showers. Mostly those showers will be in the north. Drier more widely this weekend and temperatures on the up again.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
How the threat of cyber attacks is now delaying voting for our next Prime Minister.
Good morning. It's just gone 7 o'clock. It's Wednesday, the 3rd of August. Very warm welcome to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Mark Longhurst. Here's what's leading our news this morning.
Well, voting in the Conservative leadership race being delayed by more than a week. It's after GCHQ, our spy masters, warned that cyber attacks could affect the voting system. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss facing off in another hustings tonight in Cardiff.
The first grain shipment to leave Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion has anchored off the coast of Istanbul, raising hopes for an easing of the global food crisis.
US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi speaking to the Taiwanese parliament and describing the nation as one of the freest societies in the world. China, however, has responded to her visit by announcing large-scale military drills and missile tests.
And Princess Charlotte stole the show once again, this time at the Aquatic Centre, as she visited the Commonwealth Games yesterday with her parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge.
And don't forget to let us know your views. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us @gbnews.
So our top story this hour, the race for the leader of the Tory party is continuing. Another hustings due to be scheduled this evening in Cardiff.
But a security issue has now caused a delay in delivering the ballot papers for that leadership election.
Well, to discuss this and more on the leadership contest, we're joined now by Kat Neelan. She's senior UK political editor of Insider. A very good morning to you. Let's talk first of all, shall we, about this GCHQ revelation. They're concerned that the whole voting process could be vulnerable to foreign intervention, and by foreign, I don't know if not necessarily international, but by not.
I wonder who they could mean.
Wonder who they're concerned about. But this has delayed things by at least a week.
Yes, I mean it's not clear whether it will delay the entire process or just the sort of postal vote part of it. At the minute, it just sounds like it's the latter. So I think probably we're still looking at a September 5th conclusion. But yes, big questions about exactly what's going on here, and at a time when obviously there are a lot of hostile states getting more hostile than they have been for a while.
Yeah, I mean, David Mellor is reflecting that, the Tory party doesn't seem to know exactly how many members it's got anyway. And the argument was, well, the makeup of that membership won't necessarily go online to vote digitally. They've got to have bits of paper that they sign.
Yes, I think that's probably quite likely. But we don't know. I think the last time we had a sort of definitive number was about 3 or 4 years ago. So we don't know exactly how many there are. And obviously the makeup of the voters has changed quite a bit. That could be reflected in the makeup of the membership.
Yeah, and the very strange system of voting in that even though the majority of them will probably register postal votes, they will all have this ability to change that vote electronically, and that's where the risk, I presume,
I think that's one of the things that's being changed as a result of this.
Right.
OK, let's talk about the latest YouGov poll. We've been waiting over a week for it. They polled views of members last week, and that gap between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak widening still further. Bad news for Camp Sunak.
Well, yes, although having said that, yesterday's U-turn may well have changed the dynamics slightly. I mean, I don't think it's yet fatal for Liz Truss. I think we're still sort of odds on for a Truss premiership, but yesterday kind of blew things up a bit.
Let's talk about that in more detail, because the Truss camp has come back and said she was misrepresented. But a lot of the journalists that saw that press release say it was quite clear that they were talking about cutting pay across the board, not just for civil servants. And this is what blew up, that suddenly they realised it was going to affect teachers, it was going to affect nurses, policemen and so on.
Yes. And yesterday was really a lesson in how not to deal with things. You had the policy go out, and then you had a long period of criticism from Rishi Sunak's supporters and others saying this will kill off levelling up. Then you had Labour coming out, multiple press releases from Labour saying, this is Tory destroying the North that they protest to care for. And then you had a statement come out saying it had been willfully misrepresented. And that's when journalists said, hang on a minute, here's the press release, black and white.
We did our job.
What we were saying. And then after that, Liz Truss then saying, actually, this is no longer my policy, which I think is an indication of the fact that, she kind of accepts that she can't quite get out of it that easily.
So this will be for Rishi Sunak to capitalise on as much as possible. Not only has he been bought extra time by this GCHQ concern, but the lady turning yesterday.
Yeah, the lady is for turning.
The lady is for turning, was what his camp was saying, calling it austerity on steroids. The question is whether or not it'll do enough to bridge that gap, which is now extended to 34 points.
I think Team Sunak had probably their best day yesterday. Certainly, I kind of detected no small amount of glee from some of the people I was talking to. It was a huge misstep. As I say, I don't think it is fatal, but a lot will rest on what happens now and how each of the candidates kind of responds to it. Now, Rishi Sunak, in one of the early hustings, went too hard on Liz Truss and got accused of mansplaining.
The interruptions.
He will want to avoid that accusation again. Likewise, how Liz Truss responds, will she kind of try to offer new policies to make up for the old one? That could be quite dangerous because they may be knee-jerk ones that have lots of flaws within them.
Well, on that point, I mean, it does feel like this policy blizzard every day trying to generate new headlines. If this continues at this rate for 5 weeks, is that not very dangerous to be coming up with national policies at this kind of on the hoof, as it's been described?
Yes, I mean, obviously they're constrained by the manifesto, so that there's only so far they can go. And I think probably they're also dancing around what people really want, which is, sort out the holiday mess. Obviously, is not going to be something that they can do by the
make
time
our petrol cheaper.
In September.
Yeah.
Cost of living.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they are talking about tax cuts, the difference being when they come in, but it's still feeling very much jam tomorrow.
Is there actually a danger in this, in that if we are going to see this go down to the wire on September the 5th, I mean, we've got the Bank of England deciding interest rates tomorrow that could go up another 0.5%, that the economic picture could worsen even further in the coming weeks.
Talk of recession.
Talk of recession now. Whoever is going to be the front runner, their in-tray is going to look, you know, pretty deep.
It's almost who
would want it? Exactly.
But never underestimate a politician's ego. I think, it's going to be an incredible challenge, and it's going to be a rough 6 months. The first 6 months in are going to be pretty hellish for all of us, but for the Prime Minister as well.
And Kat Neelan, a serious point that we've kind of really sort of has dawned on us today is that our, sitting Foreign Secretary, very much distracted at the moment, eyes on this leadership contest, and yet very serious international geopolitical concerns going on right across the globe. We've had Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda situation, the proliferation potentially of leadership there. We've got the situation in the Black Sea with the first ship leaving Odessa, and then now the Straits of Taiwan. How concerned should we be about the Foreign Secretary at the moment, and also the Prime Minister off on holidays as well?
Yes, well, I mean, I guess this is showing you that a caretaker government is really perhaps not the best thing in the world when, particularly at a time like this. We even before recess, we saw a lot of ministers avoiding appearances before committees and so on, that there were sort of bills that never made it. I think there are questions about, just how much work is going on behind the scenes.
Well, none of us can forget, of course, where Dominic Raab got in trouble last summer when the Afghanistan withdrawal kicked off, and he was on holiday, wasn't he?
That was the Sun Lounger, wasn't it?
It was the Sun Lounger gate. Anyway, we will leave it there. Kat Neelan, Senior UK Political Editor for Insider. Always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. The first shipment carrying grain out of Ukraine to the world market has now anchored off the coast of Istanbul in the past few hours, that is. I think we've got a live shot of the ship. There it is, with hopes now of easing the global food crisis. It's in the Bosphorus, but it will have to be inspected by, well, all and sundry, I think.
Absolutely. Well, look, the Ukrainian President Zelensky has welcomed this news, but stating that now the goal really must be regularity, with far more boats now leaving every day.
Well, joining us now from Kyiv is a member of Ukraine's parliament, Oleksiy Goncharenko. Thank you very much for joining us once again, a friend of the programme here on GB News, of course. I guess that the hope is that this successful voyage will actually open up plenty more, with I think you've got about 6 other deliveries that may be able to join it fairly soon.
Hello, yes, it's a big news for Ukraine, for the world, because it's about food crisis, it's about price for fish and chips in British pubs and price for beer, because it is made from Ukrainian barley and fish and chips are fried on Ukrainian sunflower oil. So, and also it's good news for North African countries, millions of people in which are starving already without Ukrainian grain. So that is important. More 15 ships are now blocked in Odessa ports, and today some of them will leave and after the first arrived secure to Istanbul and showed that the corridor is working. So part of them, some of them will leave today from Odessa. But what will be the most important is when new ships will arrive to Odessa, because this ship and these 15 which I mentioned, these ships were stuck, were blocked in Odessa ports from February, and now they're just leaving from February, from the start of Russian invasion. But we are waiting for new ships to arrive to Odessa to take Ukrainian grain, and that will be, I can't say the end of world food crisis, but definitely a very good progress in this.
As you say, global food crisis. But just give us a sense of the scale of the problem, because we're talking about 26,000 tonnes on board the ship that we can see there, the Ranzoni, just docked outside Istanbul. Those are the live pictures. But there will be many tonnes of grain that will simply go to waste because it will not be able to be kept in the conditions it needs to be kept in for long periods of time. And we're 6 months into this war. So much wastage, so much won't be able to reach those people that so desperately need it. How dire is the situation?
What is very important is that these shipments will give Ukrainian farmers finances to make a new seeding season in the autumn. Because without this, next year would be a disaster. Because Ukraine, which is like 12% of world wheat export, that just imagine, for example, for Lebanon, Ukraine gives 80% of their wheat. For Egypt, Ukraine and Russia together gives 85% of their grain. For Libya, Ukraine alone gives more than 50%. So it means that without Ukrainian grain, a number of countries in the world would be on the edge of hunger strikes, of social unrest. Mediterranean in order to run away from hunger. That was exactly the playbook of Putin. That was exactly what Putin was trying to achieve. And Putin has not stopped yet. He will do everything he can, like he attacked Odessa port just hours after signing of the deal. He will do everything he can to slow down the process, to make the shipments as teaspoon style as possible. So the whole world should be very cautious. Russia understands only one language of force.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how much do you trust the Russians to continue this safe passage? And indeed, would you like to, or is it possible maybe to have NATO maritime forces in the Black Sea to actually have some protection for these voyages?
That would be the best option. The best option for the whole world is to make Black Sea demilitarized zone and Odessa port, to make it, because significance of Odessa port is 1/8 of the world corn export, 1/6 of the world wheat export, just imagine. So I think that the world has all the right to say these areas cannot be attacked and NATO warships can secure it. That would be the best option. Unfortunately, NATO countries are not ready to do this, as we see. So for the moment, the best what we have is this corridor. But again, you should be absolutely aware of the fact that Putin will do everything he can to disrupt this corridor. So we know one lesson, that never ever believe Russians, and all his goals are still on the place. He wants this chaos in the world. So we should be very cautious.
NATO not willing to do that because the West has been at pains, as you know, as we've discussed in this very studio, at pains not to be directly involved in the conflict. And then yet yesterday, Russia accusing America of being now directly involved in the invasion. And this comes just a day after this really stark warning from Antonio Guterres from the United Nations that we are just one small miscalculation away from nuclear annihilation. I mean, the situation is still incredibly grave.
Situation is very hard, but what should be absolutely clear, Russia understands only force. All compromises they understand as weakness. So when they say we are not directly involved, we are directly involved, let's forget about it. Let's do it in the way where Russia should be made to respect international law. That is the only way. Why this corridor became possible? Because Ukrainian army had military successes. Because we destroyed big portion of Russian Black Sea Fleet, because we liberated Snake Island, because the United Kingdom, God save the Queen, thanks to Boris Johnson and UK people, gave to you.
We just seem to have lost the end of Alexei.
Yeah, we've lost the signal, I think, for the moment to Kyiv, but there we are. Yes, we're back with you. But
I'm saying that without UK harpoons, which we received, and without military successes of Ukrainian army, this deal will never be real. So the only language Russia understands is force. So let's show the force and the strength of the free world to them. And warships in the Black Sea is the best option. And the world should not be afraid of them. Because if only Putin will feel the fear, he will blackmail and threaten with like 100 times more.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your views there in Kyiv this morning and joining us. And let's hope you're back with us at some stage to enjoy some British fish and chips and British beer made with your products. There's a thought for you to hold.
Thank you. Thank you to
GB
News.
OK, the time is 16 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. And as we've been discussing this morning, China has placed its military on high alert. That's in response to the US House Speaker's visit to Taiwan. Nancy Pelosi travelled to Taipei despite a warning from the Chinese president that it would undermine relations. The Chinese ambassador to the UK is also warning British MPs not to follow Pelosi's example.
In the sport, Adam Peaty has bounced back, as he says, from being at the lowest of the low. He took gold in the men's 50 metres breaststroke in the final Commonwealth Games race, perhaps last night, after his 8-year unbeaten run over 100 metres ended on Sunday when he only managed 4th. He's admitted he had expected too much of himself after breaking his foot in training just 10 weeks ago.
And a snorkeler has suffered a suspected shark attack off the coast of Cornwall. The swimmer suffered a leg injury following the encounter 15 miles off the coast of Penzance. Blue Shark Snorkel Trips, that's the company that organised the tour, said these incidents were extremely rare and they were in continued talks with shark experts as to what happened.
I just realised why he swam so quickly and got that record, and it looks as if those sharks were in that pool up in Birmingham. Blue sharks?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of sharks.
No, because, I mean, you've reported down in the southwest, of course, over many years, and it was always the basking sharks, which are huge, but they only eat plankton.
Yes.
These, this is a different kettle of fish, if you pardon the expression.
But I think in the shark's defence, and I never thought I'd find myself being a shark apologist, but there you go. In this particular incident, it sounds as though they went out and sought out this type of shark.
Went looking for trouble.
Yeah, and knocked on its doorstep, if you will. And, you know, perhaps if you do that, you have to run the risk. I think the woman who suffered the leg injury said that she didn't blame the shark at all.
I mean, we should say she's, it says savages there, but she is OK.
Yeah.
I think Coast Guard managed to get her on a boat and got her to hospital, get checked over. But, I mean, you can see, obviously, for the poor old shark, he thinks that's a tasty seal lunch.
Well, exactly. And I've been told, I've been snorkelling off the coast of Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, obviously famous for shark attacks.
That's a long swim from Cornwall. Yeah.
But I was told there that sharks often go for snorkelers as opposed to scuba divers, because snorkelers are closer to the surface of the sea and they look like these tasty seals that are essentially, you know, McDonald's snacks to cheeky sharks.
Take-away lunch.
There's lots of seals around the coast of Cornwall, as we know. So.
Well, I mean, let us know if you've had a close encounter and whether you think maybe dropping into the middle of blue sharks is not a good idea for your summer holes.
Yes, share your shark attack or shark spotting horror stories, or indeed just your nightmares. I mean, I'm just not a shark fan. I don't like them. But let us know your thoughts this morning. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Yes, we're going to need a bigger boat. Coming up after the break, Will Hollis bringing us all the details of another dramatic day in the Commonwealth Games up in Birmingham. Adam Peaty, of course, with that big comeback. And Aidan with us on the latest from the Lionesses' next big match. First, let's get the latest on the weather forecast.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's a gloomy start for many of us with some rain, but brighter skies are on their way later. Those brighter skies are to the north of a cold front which is currently crossing England and Wales. Along that cold front, thick and low cloud with some early rain. But as the cold front pushes through, brighter skies will appear and a scattering of showers. So a grey start to the day for southern parts of England. The rain clearing southwest England, South Wales in the next few hours, and then that pushes into central and southern parts of England. Turns to showers, I think, and it doesn't quite reach the far southeast, where it does stay dry with increasingly sunny skies later, and the skies brighten across much of the country, but there will be a further showery pulse of rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Temperatures at around average in the north, high teens, low 20s. Further south, 23 or 24 for Cardiff and Exeter, but 28 Celsius for London. And then overnight, clear spells for much of England and Wales. A few more showers coming along for North Wales for a time and North England. But most of the showers will affect Scotland, and some longer spells of rain will cross the country through the night. 11 to 14 Celsius for Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland. 15 or 16 for much of England and Wales, and here it will be a warm start to the day with plenty of sunshine first thing, staying dry for the southern third of the UK with a mixture of bright spells and showers elsewhere. The showers fairly isolated though, I think, for northern England and much of Wales, more frequent for parts of Scotland and the north of Northern Ireland. A cooler day for many, 24 in the southeast, 18 to 22 elsewhere. Friday also sees a return of sunny spells and showers. Mostly those showers will be in the north. Drier more widely this weekend and temperatures on the up again.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The time is 7:23. Still to come on our show later this morning at 7:45. We'll be speaking to the very doctor who successfully separated conjoined twins who shared fused brains using virtual reality. Stepped on a plane straight after that surgery.
It is an extraordinary story.
Absolutely
amazing.
To us here in
31
the
hours in the operating theatre, something. Coming up too at 8:20, we're talking about gout. Well, it's not just a disease fit for a king, images of Henry VIII. We're looking into the hidden risks associated with the condition.
Yeah, things you might not realise as well. Get in touch. Remember, all of our conversations are open to you. We love to hear your thoughts. We are the People's Channel. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Day 6 for all the athletes at the Commonwealth Games, continuing in Birmingham, of course. 30 golds up for grabs today, from mountain biking to the shot put.
Well, our Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins us from Birmingham now to tell us all about everything that happened yesterday. It looked like the red mist returned. Adam Peaty back where he belongs, at the top of the podium.
Yes, no, that comeback was quite incredible. Just to take us back to where we were on Sunday, the upset and the disappointment seeing Britain's golden boy, England's golden boy, Adam Peaty, not competing in the way that we really expected him to. Everybody expects him to get that gold. Commiserations all round, and he was seriously contemplating what he might do next. The only medal that was missing from Adam Peaty's collection was the 50-metre breaststroke, and that's where he was in the pool for yesterday at the Sandwell Aquatic Centre. One of the things that he said is if you back a lion into a corner, he's going to bite, and he really did bite back. He did get that gold. He did achieve that thing that he always wanted to, and in a few different interviews he said that he can retire now with a lot of pride behind him. Adam Peaty, obviously 8 years unbeaten until Sunday, so it's nice to see him bounce back in this way and he can move on from this Commonwealth Games and into the next part of his career.
Well, we're just looking at the front page of the papers as well. Here it is. We found it. The Times, with a certain spectator featured on the front. The royal seal of approval for it all yesterday.
Yeah, of course. Princess Charlotte taking the attention away from the swimmers at that same Sandwell Aquatic Centre. It's always fantastic to see the royalty involved, and we know they are heavily involved in these games. We saw at the very start Prince Charles opening it. Now that Princess Charlotte has been there with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, taking away a little bit of that attention. Some of the pictures that are on screen are of her having a bit of a mess around, arguing with her dad, rolling her eyes when he was probably trying to explain what was going on in the 1500s where they were watching Luke Turley compete. They were also with the Earl and the Countess of Wessex as well, enjoying a bit of a family day out, but also representing what makes this Commonwealth Games so strong.
Yeah, I gather she's a big fan of gymnastics, so I think she picked the right day to go with the swimming and the gymnastics going on, because today it's all about weightlifting and boxing. What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, well, there are some fantastic things just behind me where we are at the NEC, just behind this lake, that big yellow and pink colourful building. The one to watch, in my opinion, is Emily Campbell. You remember back to Tokyo 2020, held last year just because of COVID. Emily Campbell, that weightlifter, the first female British weightlifter to get a medal in an Olympics Games for her category, 87 kg. She got a silver. A lot of people from where I'm from as well, I'm a little bit biased, in Nottingham will be cheering her on today. There's also boxing. Delicious Ori, Russian-born in Moscow, but then moved to England, moved to Wolverhampton. He's representing Team England today. He's also being trained by a very famous boxer, Anthony Joshua, so that's something that you should watch out for at the NEC today.
Thank you very much indeed for that. You may have to swap his gloves, of course, for the ring. I don't think they're quite big enough, the ones we've just seen. Anyway, thank you for that from Birmingham. But joining us now in the studio, Aidan's with us because, well, Petey really did go for it, didn't he? Because we remember the 100 metres. He said he ran out of steam, that 25 final metres. He had plenty left in the tank last night.
Certainly did. It's amazing what a couple of days' rest can do as well. I mean, yeah, he was... I mean, that's a crushing psychological blow when everyone's expecting you to win like that, in any walk of life, in any walk of sport, particularly any kind of discipline. So to go back and take the medal that was missing from his collection was one hell of an achievement. Now, yes, he had a foot injury. That was what was really holding him back. We spoke to his mother.
He actually broke his foot.
Yeah, earlier,
10 weeks ago.
just over 2 months ago now. So we spoke to his mother on Sunday, Caroline, and she said, look, that might be a problem for him. But in terms of what motivates him going forward, I mean, it's going to be the times. He was never really worried about the medals because he's won so many medals. He wants to set a time that's unattainable for anybody else in the next 20 years. Now, that's easier said than done, of course. But in terms of what he did yesterday, it was battling through the psychological trauma of having lost a race. So it was a little bit like Laura Kenny when we spoke about it yesterday. She was saying that she just wasn't up for this at all and didn't think she had it in her to win. But when she reached the line, something... As is the want of an elite athlete, they just push themselves over the line when necessary. And it was, I suppose, we were speaking just off camera, weren't we, about Steve Ovett and Seb Coe back in 1980.
Oh, gosh, and their rivalries and how one sort of was expected to win the 800, you're saying?
Yeah, so Coe was expected to win the 800, loses unexpectedly to Steve Ovett. Then they go 3 days later in the 1500, which was Ovett's specialty, and Coe then goes and surprises him. You've got it. So lifting yourself off the canvas like that. Tyson Fury was the same a couple of years ago when he was floored by
coming off the canvas.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a psychological blow, literally, in the case of a boxer.
Yeah, Aidan, if people were watching yesterday, we were talking about the Lionesses, Serena Wiegmann, her contract being renewed, and you were talking about possible clauses if the states option came up. Well, now it looks as though there's going to be a fixture for the Lionesses against the United States, just been announced by the FA, and of course they are the ones to beat always.
Yeah, exactly. Now I think that'll be a full house. There's no question about that. October the 7th, they're looking at Wembley. The international game looks very strong in women's football. We don't want it to become like rugby, where the international game is dominant, but the club game is not so dominant. Well, it's just quite weak by comparison. Chelsea averaged 2,500 crowds in the WSL, and they're the biggest club and the most successful club. We need to see a big advancement on that. I suppose, yes, the focus on the international game keeps women's football in the public domain. It keeps it on the tip of people's tongue. but we need to see improvements around that time. I think it's probably a good time to have it early October because the WSL season will be underway by then, and they'll hope to get kind of a reciprocal engagement at the league level as we need it, as we've got it international.
And of course, interesting because the USA may be one of the main rivals for the World Cup next year.
Absolutely.
But we talked about legacy as well after the game, and all those youngsters in the crowd watching at Wembley, and we visited all these various football clubs where the girls were giving a thumbs up. You were mentioning it's the schools that are going to be the key to this, and we got news on that this morning.
Well, yeah, we can't. I mean, there's a government guidance. I mean, I don't know why this guidance has been published today. I mean, it's 48 hours after the ball was kicked. It's nonsense, utter nonsense. And so you have to consider as well, some inner city schools haven't even got pitches. They can't even play any sport. Playing any sport is a luxury. Why is football so arrogant as to think that it can just go into schools and say, you need to be playing football because it's going to improve the women's game? What about cricket? What about tennis? Tennis has done far more to advance the cause of women's sport than football has ever done. Football's Johnny-come-lately in all this. Golf has done more. You've got a really burgeoning women's section in golf, and that's been going on for 20 or 30 years. Female players from all over the world have been competing at a high level and earning good money out of it. So why should football go into schools and say, you need to be playing this? I mean, why can't it be somebody's choice? Why can't it be a choice?
But I guess that a lot of these young girls are now going to be saying, oh, can I have a go at football? Because they've seen, all the celebrations, they've seen Wembley, and they think, I'd like to have a go at
long
that.
term, I'm sure there will be opportunities, but in the meantime, you can play at weekends. There's Sunday leagues, there's Saturday leagues. I mean, for me, it was different. When I was 8 years old, I remember my interest was first peaked at school. And then I wanted to play on Saturday and a Sunday. Yes, this current generation are going to have to do it a different way around. Maybe play it on Sunday and play it on Saturday and play for you're not going to get young girls playing for a pub team just yet. But even so, I think that okay, if they have to do it in reverse, then they have to do it. But schools it should not be incumbent on schools to hold the solution, hold the key to the development of women's football in the next 20 years. They've got other things on their mind, quite frankly.
Even if some areas don't have the local clubs and the local playing fields, that the only place you can get the green field is actually in the school.
Well, you may not. If they haven't got it locally, they probably haven't got it in schools. It's a school and the weekend culture of football is probably, if they're both in the same area, they're probably going to have the same problem. So I think it's good to encourage kids of all ages, irrespective of their gender, to play sport. It doesn't have to be football.
Yeah. My little 4-year-old girl starts school in September, signed her up to Little Kickers. They don't have any green space in the primary school, though. It's an inner-city school.
Yeah.
But they've got tarmac, and she'll be out there chasing a ball around. But it's just
not
ball
the same,
skills from a young age.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But she's keen, and I think, why
it's
not?
fun. They should be having fun, and that's what it's about. When they start playing professionally and the pressure's on, that's where there'll be plenty of time not to have fun, believe me.
And they learn how to clean their own boots.
Exactly.
Thanks for that.
Aidan, thank you. We're going to take a break. After that, David Mellor will be back, and Claire Muldoon will go through your newspapers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Time for the papers. Joining us this morning, former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and now, of course, classic music expert as well, and Claire Muldoon, broadcaster, an old mate.
And classic everything, I think.
Oh, very good, very good, yes. And you're heading for, Claire, the Telegraph, first of all. Liz Truss putting the boot into Nicola Sturgeon.
I just, sometimes headlines land on my lap, and indeed this one has. My relationship with the First Minister of Scotland is tardy, to say the least. I'm not a big fan, to say the least, either.
She hasn't got that many, has she?
Well,
Is that fair
apparently,
to say?
well, you would think that, given the population in Scotland and the fact that the massive majority did not vote for the SNP, nor indeed her. But you would think that she rules the place like a queen. In fact, I think that's what she wants to be instead of the devolved local councillor that she actually is.
Re-elected 3 times, has she not?
Well, she's the longest-serving First Minister of Scotland ever, after Alex Salmond, and the only female one. But to be honest with you, I think people are starting to be quite sickened by her rhetoric, by her constant narrative, or sorry, did I say narrative? I meant nagging, of what should be and should not be the case for Scotland. People didn't vote for her, people didn't vote for independence, and yet she's gone to the Supreme Court in October to vote to go for this pretendy ref, as we call it, the pretendy ref for Scottish independence, hopefully she hopes, in October 23 next year. Amen to that, Liz Truss. Now, whilst Liz Truss is, I think she should be doing her job at the moment as Foreign Secretary, which clearly she's not because she's too involved with the leadership campaign. However, I don't think she's in a position to use quite emotive language like get back in your box or let's ignore her. Because ultimately, like it or not, Nicola Sturgeon has been voted and she is there.
Yeah.
So she's actually a member of the state.
Is there a point there, David, that actually this plays to the SNP playbook in that the SNP they are the victims of Westminster once more?
Exactly. And why rescue her from her own ineptitude? Because the problem for the SNP, it's a religion, not a political movement.
Yeah.
When you're a religion, you don't have to deliver anything very effective. When you actually look at what the SNP has done in Scotland in crucial areas like education and health, they haven't done very well. And anything that makes it easy for Sturgeon to get back on her high horse and, doing the sort of Braveheart stuff.
It's the heart, not the head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you describe the SNP as a religion. New York Times, I suppose, would describe Brexit as something of a religion. And Andrew Neil, writing a piece in the Mail today, really fed up with the New York Times constantly sticking the boot in.
Well, it's quite interesting, actually, because, as I think I keep saying, it's probably rather tedious and boring, but hopefully it's also true. Most people don't get their news from newspapers because they've already got it online, on television or whatever. What a good newspaper does is provide thoughtful pieces.
And the context.
And context. And Andrew Neil, who, God, I used to share a flat with Andrew for a brief period many, many years ago, and I've always admired him. I think he's a first-class thinker. And the point he's really making is that the New York Times has decided to attack Britain. And in order to attack Britain, they take on a lot of very fanatical journalists who have no following here in order to portray a picture of Britain that's completely at odds with the reality, whilst at the same time failing in their duty to write sceptical pieces about wokery in the United States, which is becoming quite a serious threat. I mean, I didn't realise things. Who knows, maybe it's not true. But, a lot of schools that were called after Abraham Lincoln no longer are. He's being stripped out because he's now regarded as a bad thing. And so is George Washington. And you keep thinking...
Even though he's the one that lifted slavery.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So you think to yourself, what is the matter with America? The whole role...
Or is it just the New York Times? Maybe it's not America.
Maybe it's but they are responding.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's papers in San Francisco and Los Angeles just as bad. And I just think it's a thought-provoking piece because we don't always work hard enough to understand why America is like it is, and the picture that America gets of the rest of the world is often actively misleading.
And very myopic.
The headline that the New York Times was running that Andrew has challenged is "The fantasy of Brexit Britain ends." It's interesting hearing Jacob Rees-Mogg talking about this yesterday. I don't know if you heard
What about
any of
fantasies?
his quotes. Well, yes, we were talking about the situation in the queues in Dover, and he admitted that he was wrong, that the UK status as a third country would have an impact on border control trying to get into France.
But I think that the argument about America and doing down Britain and failing and falling for sort of wokery doesn't, fortunately, require me to disprove that Brexit is a failure, because it is a failure. Look, I voted for Brexit because I was in an interesting position. Most people thought it was like a football game where you either love the EU or you love Brexit. Well, I didn't cheer for either side. I hated the EU for the time I was there because it's just an awful place to see in operation. But also, I thought a lot of the guff that came out about Brexit was, it was not really, it was children's stuff.
This was the Dominic Cummings playbook, you think?
Yes, absolutely. And basically, where we've got to now, and this is the central failure of Boris Johnson, get Brexit done. Oh, I got Brexit done.
What
no,
next?
He didn't
Missed
get
opportunities.
Brexit done. He didn't get Brexit done because what really requires Brexit to be done is to deliver on some of the promises made. I didn't see that.
OK, Times, page 4. BA taking thousands more seats off sale just as we're all supposed to be going on holiday and the kids are off.
Just as you are. But to be fair, it's not BA's fault. It's Heathrow and the footfall and the capacity that they say cannot be exceeded on a daily basis of 100,000 passengers. So BA have taken the decision to take thousands more seats off sale, predominantly domestic flights and predominantly short-haul flights. No reason for anyone to be up in arms of anything. If your seat is booked, you've still got the seat and the plane will fly. But there are no more openings for the next 2 weeks. If you want a domestic ticket, it will not be sold. All that will then do, as supply and demand, basic economics, will push the prices up for other operators like Ryanair,
EasyJet.
who is an EasyJet, who is actually as well in the Times editorial now the best of the bad bunch in terms of customer loyalty and customer feedback. They're doing really, really, really well.
But why is that? Because, I mean, BA, the world's favourite airline, that was a long time ago.
But that was when BA was a British airline. It doesn't mean it was perfect, but it was British. But at least had a commitment to Britain. It's now a Spanish
parent company.
I think it'll get back to that.
And we've allowed Heathrow to be owned by the Spanish. I mean, why on earth do we allow fundamental pieces of our infrastructure to be owned by people whose ability...
Water companies, the same. Yeah.
Or indeed, our electricity.
As well.
When you think of the
Telefonica.
French and the French's attitude to us, can you ever imagine Electricity de Londres giving electricity to Paris? Yeah, we are here courtesy of Electricité de France. Am I chuffed about that? Yeah. No, I'm not.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Taliban, David. The FT talking about this, page 6. Calls for them to soften hardline policies have been rejected, unsurprisingly.
Yes, I mean, the point was, look, the presidency of Joe Biden will be defined by one thing: him running away from
Afghanistan.
Yeah, and he can never ever get that back. And it's a year now, and he is regarded as one of the worst presidents. His ratings are appalling, and there was a lot of guff around at that time. Well, the Taliban are different now. They're reasonable, moderate people.
And they'll be able to run the country with support.
Of course, and the fact is that they are not, and they can't. And that's probably a horrible thing to say, so wash my mouth out with acid. But when they took out that chap who has been, I think, the last of the 8 people who planned 9/11.
Ayman al-Zawahiri.
A lot of these sort of fancy Dan houses are now being occupied by Taliban chiefs, and they take the whole bloody lot out.
Well, we'll see if there are going to be other drone strikes, because I think they were after him for 2 years doing reconnaissance and following his sort of footsteps across Kabul, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, huge bounty on his head, but there he was, as you say, walking around in the Afghan capital, courtesy of the Taliban, as you say. Claire, let's turn our attention to the Wagatha Christie case. A big interview with Rebecca Vardy in The Sun today, talking about her reaction to the verdict, and she's not happy.
From the sublime to the ridiculous, OK? 5 pages The Sun are running on this story. It's a story that just keeps on giving and is not going to go away. I didn't know for 1 minute that this would keep going the way it is.
Could it be possibly that she sold the story to make some money to pay the £3 million legal bill?
And added to that as well, Mark, Netflix are sniffing around because they want to make, or the BBC, I think it is actually, because they want to make a docudrama over the whole thing. I think it's vile. I think it's repugnant. I think in these times of economic crisis for everybody, £3 million, not only for the cost to take this to court, but the babbling on of 2 footballers' wives? Really?
Yeah.
Come on.
But I think also, the people quote the costs, and there's no doubt that these lawyers for defamation cases do wonderfully well on a lot of spurious nonsense. But we also need to remember there are huge backlogs in courts.
Yes.
You can't get a court. And the public has a stake in this. The cost of keeping the High
courts
Court
open.
the cost of paying for the judges and all of that. Yet we are providing a forum for these, morons, but only on good days.
Yeah, although obviously we should point out this is a civil case, not a criminal case. Yeah. So that,
But that is the expense. The High Court is a very expensive place to run, and you keep thinking, why? And you feel in a way that the legal system should be able to do more.
And say, don't bother.
Yeah, I mean, shouldn't a judge be able to say, look, I'm paid to hear this case, but I just want you to know X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I mean, judges should be more interventionist.
We have to leave it there. David Mellett, Claire Muldoon, thank you both so much. I have more from you in the papers at 8:30.
Let's bring you up to date with the latest.
The UK looks set to enter a recession which will hit millions of the most vulnerable households, new data shows. The report from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research has warned of a 3-quarter technical recession.
Other financial matters. Lloyds Bank warning it's seen a surge in football ticket scams ahead of the new season. Well, it says reported cases have gone up by more than 2/3 in the first half of the year. Compared to last year, that is. The victims have been losing just over £400 each on average.
An 18-year-old's been charged with the murder of a 16-year-old boy in Somerset. The teenager was found with stab wounds in a car park on Sunday evening. Joshua Del Bono from Frome remains in police custody and will appear at Bath Magistrates Court later today.
Now, conjoined twins sharing fused brains have been separated successfully in Brazil after an operation by UK-based surgeon Noriluasi Juliani, who joins us now in the studio because the operation was done by virtual reality, which we're trying to get our head round. Explain to us what on earth you did.
Sure. The simulations, the practice before the surgery for 6 months, that was virtual reality.
Okay.
We're not quite there yet. Perhaps in another 10 years, I'll be coming back and telling you we actually did it in VR. But this time around, it was the practice sessions, all the various steps that we would need to undertake in the final surgery. We practiced all of that in virtual reality, which was a huge advance.
I mean, this is a huge moment in terms of the treatment of conjoined twins. I read that you've described it as a man on the moon kind of moment. And it's very much been led, a team of 100 experts being led by you, based out of Great Ormond Street. We're very lucky to have you in the studio. I believe you come straight from the flight from Brazil and indeed went straight from theatre to that flight. So straight hot off the press, as it were. For someone as experienced as you and someone who's done all the virtual reality training ahead of the surgery, were you still nervous doing the operation?
Oh, absolutely. It's the 6th set of twins that we've separated successfully. But with every set, the risks are still the same. This is very high-risk surgery. And although we understand it a bit more than we did 20 years ago, there is a lot we still don't understand. And it's a rather difficult position to be in, to be the global expert, to be called upon from various corners of the world and not to know all the answers. So one of the key things that we're trying to do here with Gemini Untwined, our charity, is to do further research and understand how best to help these kids. Because whilst we're celebrating this particular set, as we speak, there are other children, other families around the globe that need this service, that need our support, need our help.
So do you need a world centre of expertise for that then, so that you can actually really assess how to treat varying difficulties of operation with a set of experts together?
Precisely. You've hit the nail on the head there. What we're doing here is it's like the National Health Service that we have in this country feeding a global health service, because these conditions are super rare. There's no one team or one country that has enough experience to be able to do them better and improve the odds for these kids. So what we've done by setting up the charity Gemini Untwined 4 years ago is to pool that global experience. So it doesn't really matter where these kids are born, where these families are. We're studying them, trying to understand how best to help, and then reaching out, linking up with the local teams, and then improving the odds for these kids. But like I said, there are other children out there we need to carry on helping. So we do need the support of Britain to support the charity as a perfect example of the NHS, of the research.
I mean, would Great Ormond Street be able to fill that role?
It has. We are, by default, the global leaders in this kind of work at the moment. And that's the backstory, how the NHS supports Great Ormond Street, how the research ecosystem within UCL and the wider healthcare sector in the UK, in tech, has helped deliver this result for children 11 hours away from us.
Yeah, and so presumably your team and you as well could easily be travelling anywhere in the world to do another one of these at some point in the not too distant future. But I want to focus in on Bernardo and Arthur Lima in Rio specifically. They are both 3 years old, which is quite old, I presume, for this kind of surgery. And the prognosis for twins having this kind of surgery is worse the older they are.
Correct.
You want to get in there as soon as possible. What's the future look like for them? Because you've successfully managed to separate their fused brains. And there's this lovely photograph of them holding hands together in the way twins so often do, but side by side for the first time. How are they doing?
It's still early days. You know, we did the final separation 7 weeks ago. So far, they're making good progress, but we do need to wait for a few more months before we can prognosticate better. And you're absolutely right. This surgery has to happen in an ideal world under the age of 1, because the children adapt and recover so much better when it's done early. The issue with this particular set was COVID, complicated matters for them. So whilst they were presented to their local hospital 2.5 years ago, Brazil was under lockdown like the rest of the world, and the local team couldn't really access our support during COVID, hence the delays.
So what would you want the charity to do then, to enable, as you say, very young babies to be flown to Britain to have the operation, or for you and a team to get out to wherever they are?
Yeah, perfect question. If they have the infrastructure to deliver this kind of service in their home country, then absolutely our vision is to disseminate this knowledge. We're not a beacon tower that needs to pull everything here. That's not the idea. It's really dissemination of knowledge globally. That's the primary aim. In certain circumstances, if the technical platforms aren't there, if the infrastructure isn't there, then yes, we'll have to get these kids either over here, or the third option would be, if we're thinking about, for example, Southeast Asia, linking up with a centre closer to their home country, perhaps in Australia, and then supporting them deliver something like this. It's very much a global health service that's run from Gemini.
And Dr. Bernardo and Arthur, they shared this fused brain, but presumably the next surgery that you perform could be a different part of the head or the body where the twins could be joined. So how, much replication can there be, or does each case need different type of techniques? I mean, you talk about using these virtual reality systems to help you train, but, how much will that necessarily help?
So the platforms, the work we do is very specialized, but the platforms that we use, the virtual reality platforms, are accessible and used right across the spectrum, whether we're talking about neurosurgery, craniofacial surgery, or other types of surgery. So the learnings that we take from these cases really feed a lot of the more routine neurosurgery work that we do.
I'm just looking at one of the quotes here. After the operation, I felt I had pushed myself right to the limit. I wish someone could pick me up and put me on the plane. I mean, you were there, literally holding a scalpel, or do you have other, robotic techniques that you can use, or is it still that you've got to have that expertise in your fingers?
Still very much there at the cutting edge with a scalpel or other instruments in my hand. Dr. Gabriel, my counterpart there, was, the two of us were there all the way through it. It went on for a bit longer than expected. We were expecting the second stage, the final stage, to last perhaps 12 to 16 hours, but it was a bit longer, so we had to work. Well, we started Thursday morning at around 6:30 and carried on through till Friday morning.
Wow.
And I had to get on a flight a few hours later. So,
and you've got to keep the concentration absolutely.
You have to. So you manage to do it as it's happening, but the minute they separate it and they're safe, you zone in back into your own self, and there's very little left to, get you to the plane.
Well, absolutely incredible work you do, Dr. Owasi Jelani. We're very grateful that you've made time to come and talk to us after this physical endurance thing that you also have been through, and absolutely just phenomenal work. Thank you so much.
And keep us updated on how the kids are doing as well. That'd be great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Right, stay with us. After the break, we'll be finding out more about that cyber threat that's been revealed to the Conservative leadership contest. But first of all, here's your Wednesday forecast.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's a gloomy start for many of us with some rain, but brighter skies are on their way later. Those brighter skies are to the north of a cold front which is currently crossing England and Wales. Along that cold front, thick and low cloud with some early rain. But as the cold front pushes through, brighter skies will appear and a scattering of showers. So a grey start to the day for southern parts of England. The rain clearing southwest England, South Wales in the next few hours, and then that pushes into central and southern parts of England. Turns to showers, I think, and it doesn't quite reach the far southeast, where it does stay dry with increasingly sunny skies later, and the skies brighten across much of the country, but there will be a further showery pulse of rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Temperatures at around average in the north, high teens, low 20s. Further south, 23 or 24 for Cardiff and Exeter, but 28 Celsius for London. And then overnight, clear spells for much of England and Wales. A few more showers coming along for North Wales for a time and North England. But most of the showers will affect Scotland, and some longer spells of rain will cross the country through the night. 11 to 14 Celsius for Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland. 15 or 16 for much of England and Wales, and here it will be a warm start to the day with plenty of sunshine first thing, staying dry for the southern third of the UK with a mixture of bright spells and showers elsewhere. The showers fairly isolated though, I think, for northern England and much of Wales, more frequent for parts of Scotland and the north of Northern Ireland. A cooler day for many, 24 in the southeast, 18 to 22 elsewhere. Friday also sees a return of sunny spells and showers. Mostly those showers will be in the north. Drier more widely this weekend, and temperatures on the up again.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A threat of cyber attacks delays voting for our next Prime Minister.
Very good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 3rd of August, and this is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and me, Mark Longhurst. And here's what's leading our news this morning.
Voting in the Conservative leadership race will be delayed by more than a week after GCHQ warned that cyber attacks could affect the voting system. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will face off in another hustings tonight in Cardiff.
The first grain shipment to leave Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion has now anchored off the coast of Istanbul in the Bosphorus. It's raising hopes for an easing of the global food crisis.
The US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has spoken to the Taiwanese parliament, describing the nation as one of the freest societies in the world. China's responded to Pelosi's visit by announcing large-scale military drills and missile tests.
And guess who stole the show at the Aquatic Centre yesterday? Princess Charlotte and the royal family visiting the Commonwealth Games with her parents, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Swimmer Adam Peaty ending his campaign on a high note by winning gold in the men's 50 metres breaststroke.
Royal photographer's dream is Princess Charlotte, isn't she? Get in touch. We love to hear from you. Lots of you have been doing so. We'll be reading out the best of those just as soon as we can. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Here we go again. The race for the leader of the Tory party continuing. Another hustings to be held in Cardiff tonight. But meanwhile, a security issue has caused a delay in delivering the ballot papers for that leadership election.
Yeah, elsewhere in the news, almost 700 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday, making another record for 2022. And Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan has caused a major reaction from Beijing.
Well, to discuss all the stories and more, we're joined by senior UK political editor at Insider, Kat Neelan, and our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Good morning to you both. Thanks for joining us. Where are we going to start? I guess we've got a situation with GCHQ being involved that's going to be raising a few eyebrows. Our spy masters saying that there might be dirty tricks afoot.
So this, on the one hand, might raise some eyebrows, but on the other, should probably reassure people that this is a process choosing the next Prime Minister, but not entirely run through 4 Matthew Parker Street, where CCHQ, that's the Conservative campaign headquarters, as opposed to GCHQ.
Oh, very good.
Confusingly similar names, but clearly working together on this to ensure that this is a secure process. And there have been some changes now. Members received an email yesterday saying that far from what was being reported until yesterday, this idea that you could vote by post and then if you change your mind you could vote again online. Now when the Conservative Party receives your paper ballot, they will deactivate your online code so that double voting is no longer in place. And similarly, there are some security questions that have been added to the process of online voting. So you'll get your one-time unique code, you put it in, you answer a couple of security questions, you vote, and then you are unable to access the website again using that same code.
Gotcha.
So there are all of these extra levels of security to make sure that this is a process that can't be tampered with.
OK, so all of that very reassuring, Kat, but it could change things. Not only has the latest polling coming out saying Sunak is quite far behind now, Liz Truss, and we'll talk about the specifics of that poll in a moment. But it just goes to show, a little bit of time has been bought for the Sunak camp, and also the fact that yesterday Liz Truss had a very difficult day. Could this actually affect the campaign as a whole?
Yes, I mean, obviously it's helpful for the Sunak campaign to have a bit more time and try and get his stall out a bit more, particularly today. We'll see them both reacting to yesterday's U-turn. I think, we're still looking at Liz Truss really being quite far ahead. So Rishi Sunak will have to do a lot of work to catch up with her. But it's
so the figures from that YouGov poll, 60% said they would vote for Truss, 26% said they would vote for Sunak, 2% not voting, and 11% saying they still haven't decided.
Yes, I mean, polling of Tory members is notoriously quite difficult, but that does sound like a very wide gap that even allowing for a sort of margin of error would be difficult to kind of overcome.
Yeah, and John Curtis obviously raising the fact that a lot of these polls have got to be treated with a little bit of circumspect, indicating how many were asked about these issues and so on. But the other issue is that we're maybe in a bit of a vacuum. As you said, Isabel, we've got the Foreign Secretary concentrating on hustings when we've got so much happening on the international stage, particularly this grain shipment that's coming in. You've spoken to someone else, Tobias Ellwood.
Yes, the chair of the Defence Committee, who hit the newspapers at the start of this election, at the start of this leadership contest, because he was actually suspended from the Conservative Party. Although I ascertained yesterday that he was actually able to vote in the leadership election after all. There was some confusion as to whether he had temporarily had the whip restored or not, but in the end he did. He backed Penny Mordaunt because he made this argument to the 1922 committee that if Penny Mordaunt had missed out by one vote and he had been and he'd lost the whip, that would be pretty hard to justify. So that went ahead. But no, he's just returned from Odessa, where he's been looking at this deal between Ukraine, Russia and Turkey over exporting this grain, and whether or not it's a safe passage, and whether or not this is a sustainable safe passage, looking at who is overseeing this. And his real concern is that without UN oversight of this might be a bit of a temporary measure.
Right.
Britain is doing more so than other countries, absolutely, but there isn't a clear plan as to how we stand up to Russia, that is weaponizing grain. So this plan that's just been agreed in Turkey, I'm afraid Russia's calling the shots. It's their agenda. And what I discovered in Odessa is actually there's appetite for a UN General Assembly resolution. Let's get a coalition of the willing to actually guard the maritime passage so that we control those shipping lanes, not Russia. My concern is that once about 70 ships that got caught up in Odessa prior to the start of the war, once they've departed with their grain, then Russia will have its sights on Odessa. For a long term, they wanted to actually take that city. It was part of the original Russia Empire. That's where I think their campaign after Odessa will head next. We've gained confidence. We're getting better at supporting Ukraine, but it's coming very, very late in the day. And let's recognise we still see NATO sitting on its hands. This most formidable, potent military alliance the world has ever seen. There's a fire in Ukraine and we won't put it out. And my concern is that fire will spread beyond Ukraine and we really will have to wake up.
Well, Tom, you've got the full interview with Tobias Ellwood coming up at 9:30, but there is a key question here about NATO's involvement. I mean, do we put ships, maritime forces, into the Black Sea to actually patrol this safe passage? Because that really could lead to some kind of direct confrontation with Russia.
And this is the big concern. This is why NATO has been fairly clear and fairly consistent and fairly united in terms of saying, yes, we will support Ukraine, but we can't have this risk of direct conflict. That being said, all of the discussions about the difference between offensive and defensive weaponry that we were having several months ago, they seem to have melted away. While the West was a lot more timid several months ago about whether or not we can only send weapons that could be used in defence rather than offence, sort of only NLAW missiles rather than actual fighter jets. Well, that seems to have melted away, and the West is now bolder in terms of supplying more offensive weaponry as Ukraine is moving forward. For example, potentially retaking Kherson, that really important city that Russia has been able to encroach beyond the Dnieper River. If Ukraine can push them back in there, then you've got a very clear, almost stalemate along that river that Russia will find it very hard to pass.
Game changer.
I want to talk about the other big international story of the day with you, Kat. On the front of the Mail this morning, this is the headline-grabbing visit by Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House from the States, visiting Taiwan, and the warning now from the Chinese ambassador to the UK that if any British politicians follow suit, there will be severe consequences. Are we being bullied by China?
Well, I think they're probably trying to sound quite tough. Whether they follow through or not is a different matter. But the problem will be less that there may be some sort of aggression and more that they may end up being pushed towards people that we would rather they wouldn't. There has been warnings that if we try to sort of make an enemy of China, that of course they will ally more closely with Russia, and that would be disastrous.
And in terms of Nancy Pelosi's visit, what do you think is likely to be achieved there? I mean, obviously she's gone there without the blessing of the Biden administration. I think you couldn't really imagine the visit going ahead with its blessing, given the comments coming out of Beijing. But, I mean, a very robust response from Beijing, and it feels very much like tensions have ratcheted it up as a result of that visit. Some commentators talking about World War III even. And as Mark was saying, you know, this power vacuum here in the UK, our Foreign Secretary very much looking elsewhere, Prime Minister off on his holidays.
Yes, I mean, I think it was kind of inevitable that there was going to be some sort of war of words. Whether it escalates further, you know, obviously it remains to be seen, and I think it's probably unlikely at this stage, given that it is Nancy Pelosi rather than someone from the Biden administration itself. Again, I think you could probably potentially see something similar to that playing out here, where you have a sort of non-government figure going as a sort of test.
A Tom Tugendhat type character,
exactly.
maybe.
And obviously we have heard both of the candidates talk tough on China. That is something that will play well to certain parts of the Tory party. Exactly what will happen after the contest finishes, we will find out.
Yeah. Back to domestic matters quickly. We've got latest hustings in Cardiff tonight.
Yes.
And we've got this issue about channel migrants, the numbers coming across. I mean, is that, again, likely to be a point of contention between the two candidates?
Well, yesterday we heard, of course, that it was the highest number coming across across the whole year. And given that it wasn't especially beautiful weather or the day before yesterday, I should say, compared to everything else, it does imply that potentially there's more to come. And now both candidates have put forward policy on expanding this Rwanda scheme. A future potential Truss administration would want to cast a deal with more countries, and indeed Rishi Sunak has said he would want to enhance it as well. The question is, what more could they do, though? Because we know how much trouble the Home Office has had in terms of running up against international law, in terms of being unable to work with the French authorities, with a pretty hostile reaction there to any proposals. So, yes, it will be interesting to see if they have anything more to say on this tonight, because it does seem that this small boats, channel crossing migration issue that we heard about really over a week and a half ago was when all this sort of policy was put out on this. Will we hear some more about it today? Because it has gone further down the agenda in terms of what these candidates have been talking about, really focused on economic rather than other issues.
OK, Tom Harwood, Kat Neelan, Senior UK Political Editor at Insider. Thank you both very much indeed. Well, as we've been discussing, that first shipment carrying grain out of Ukraine to the world market has anchored off the coast of Istanbul this morning, raising hopes of an easing of the global food crisis.
Yeah, still lots of checks to be done on that ship, we should add. And it's coming as Russia's ratcheted up tensions, accusing the US now of direct involvement in the war in Ukraine. The UN Secretary-General warning that the world is one miscalculation, as he said, away from nuclear war. Well, let's get the views now of Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former commander, indeed, of UK and NATO biological and nuclear forces. This would indicate that we are truly back in a Cold War? We can't hear you at the moment, Hamish. I don't know whether we've got a problem with your computer, whether it's on a mute button or whether indeed it's the line. We'll try one more time. We're just asking if this latest situation is indicating we are back in what we termed a Cold War.
Oh, shame. I'm so sorry. We seem to have problems with that line. We'll do what we can behind the scenes. In the meantime, we'll bring you up to date with the latest headlines this hour, with the time approaching 8:14. And major retailers are being accused of failing to reduce petrol prices in line with falling wholesale costs. The RAC says the wholesale cost of fuel's fallen by 20 pence since early June. But UK retailers continue to increase prices in June and only dropped their pump prices by an average of 9 pence in the month. It means drivers could be spending an average £9 a tank more than they should be.
In the sport, Adam Peaty saying he's bounced back from being at the lowest of the low. He took home gold in the men's 50 metres breaststroke last night. Could be his final Commonwealth Games race. And of course, his 8-year unbeaten run over 100 metres ended on Sunday when he came fourth. But he's admitted he had expected too much of himself after injuring his foot, breaking his foot indeed, in training back in May.
Right, I'm assured we've waved our magic wand and we can now hear from Colonel Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former commander of UK and NATO biological nuclear forces. Welcome back. Listen, really serious, sobering warnings from Antonio Guterres. And as Mark was saying, is this evidence then truly of being in a Cold War?
Yes, I think it is, very much so. Guterres said that at the meeting of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is there to control nuclear weapons. But we have the Russians threatening to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine and stationing forces and actually firing missiles from the largest nuclear power station in Europe. And also in Soviet doctrine, if local commanders think they are losing the battle, they have the ability to use what we call battlefield nuclear weapons. Add to that China, which is tripling its holding of nuclear weapons, completely contrary to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And as you said earlier, Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan creating tensions there. Only last week, Iran claimed that it had the ability to make nuclear weapons. And another rogue state, North Korea, we know is developing them and close to it. So I think since the Cold War, we have never had a time when so many nuclear weapons are potentially available to some pretty unsavoury dictators and states. Yeah. And Stephen Ludgrove also reiterated the same thing last week, that a mistake could be disastrous. So hopefully we have some very cool hands on the tiller in this country, the US and around the world, to make sure that that doesn't come to fruition.
Hamish, what are we talking about? Because people would assume when we talk about nuclear weapons that, you know, that's it, the whole world blows up, mutually assured destruction. But as you've indicated, the Russians have already, going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, put what we call tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield, small-scale things. And indeed, if Kennedy had invaded Cuba, they may well have used them. So that is in the Russian book on how to escalate.
Well, absolutely, or how to save defeat, because these weapons, although they're called battlefield nuclear weapons, they're still absolutely vast. I think the critical thing is that we, you know, back in the Cold War, for those people who are old enough to remember, everybody knew what to do. We had procedures in place, operating procedures. You know, it is not mutually assured destruction, even if some nuclear weapons are fired. I think it's very key that, you know, obviously you don't want to terrify the population, but they should have, you know, the basic wherewithal that they know what to do. Yeah, in still the unlikely event, but the devastating event that nuclear weapons are used, it certainly, you know, won't be the end, but absolutely all the diplomatic and political effort must go in to make sure they don't happen. But, you know, the worrying area is absolutely Ukraine, in my mind. We've seen that Putin has absolutely no concern about civilian casualties or collateral damage and will do anything to stave off defeat. And as we are hearing, the tide seems to be turning in Ukraine, and we must make it absolutely clear to Putin that the use of any nuclear weapons, even so-called small ones, will cross a red line that will lead to the full NATO involvement and would lead to the defeat of Russia in Ukraine.
And the situation in Ukraine having such a direct effect on us here in the UK as we possibly go into recession, this cost of living crisis being exacerbated by all the problems that we've been discussing for the last few months. But and forgive me, this is a really stupid question, but I'm asking it because if I'm thinking it, presumably other people are. You know, we've turned our attention increasingly in recent months to the talk of nuclear power as opposed to fossil power. Does that concern you, given your nuclear expertise? I mean, people sort of separate the two things, but on the one hand, we're talking about North Korea, China, and the nuclear weapons and mutual destruction. And then, you know, for many years, nuclear power was seen as the enemy.
Well, Chernobyl is in Ukraine.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, does that worry you that we could be going back to a dependence on nuclear power?
No, not at all. I think there is an interesting juxtaposition that nuclear weapons could, you know, destroy our civilization as we know it, but also nuclear power is the only sure way to prevent global warming. And we need to keep those two apart, which is why it's so important that our nuclear security is given a revamp. And that's something I've been leading on recently. We need to have a real look at our nuclear security to make sure that our nuclear power supply, which is so critical to prevent global warming, does not cloud other issues. The Non-Proliferation Treaty, that is the meeting that's going on at the moment, is so very important. And the fact that it might seem strange, the fact that Britain, France and the US have nuclear weapons is our one stick to hold the Russians and the Chinese at bay. And we must allow the diplomats to go and make sure that we remain safe from nuclear attack. And on the other hand, we must make sure that our nuclear power is safe, because it is the most viable way to prevent global warming. And you had Tobias Ellwood on earlier on, one ray of sunshine, and Tobias and I have discussed the grain supply, absolutely crucial. And I hope NATO get involved. You don't need necessary ships in the Black Sea, but certainly NATO aircraft protecting that grain. Because as you said, the cost of living crisis, the price of fuel, the price of food is all now entirely as a result of what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. The quicker we get the Ukraine situation sorted, the quicker the threat of nuclear attack diminishes, and the quicker the cost of living crisis in this country and elsewhere will be back to something that's much more manageable.
Last thought, though, Hamish, on this. When you talk about security, and you've talked about possible intent by Putin if he feels he's cornered or he's actually failing, what about the accidental firing? I mean, are the safeguards now in place for these on the battlefield, for instance? Could a commander actually have the ability to press that button and fire without an OK from Moscow?
That's a really good question. I think when it comes to what we call strategic nuclear weapons, absolutely the checks and balances are in place, and nobody can press that red button without a very detailed chain. I think people might be more concerned about the battlefield, but one of the things, without giving away, any state secrets, I'm sure that we would get pretty good indication if what we call battlefield nuclear weapons, which are on large trucks, as it were, if they started moving around and moving towards Ukraine, which I understand they're not at the moment, I think we would get warning, and that would be where the president of the US, the prime minister of the UK, and the president of France would then hopefully go direct to Putin and say, these things are moving. They move any further and we'll take them out. So we would get some warning. I think the accidental use of nuclear weapons is unlikely, but as we've discussed, there are some rogue states like Iran and North Korea that have them, and we're not entirely sure of the views and the sanity of Putin at the moment. But I think the checks and balances are in place, and I'm sure there are an awful lot of people in the NATO capitals that are keeping a very close eye on this.
Hamish, as ever, thank you for your time joining us down there in Salisbury, and apologies for the glitch on the line, but we got you, which was great. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Now, I suppose sticking really with that theme about the economy, cost of living and all the ongoing worries at the moment, a new study is now warning that the UK is going to enter a recession that will hit millions of UK households.
It's a report from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, and it's warning of a three-quarter technical recession, whatever that is.
Well, let's find out from somebody who knows a lot more than we do about these things. Economics commentator Laurie Laird and friend to the show.
Good morning.
Please explain.
It does. Those words together don't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I saw this copy, I thought, what are they talking about? What I think they're saying is roughly, a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of contraction in an economy. That's a very, very rough sort of definition of recession. In fact, the U.S. has just experienced that. Not clear whether the U.S. is in recession or not. And I think what the NIESR is saying is that we'll see 3 consecutive quarters where the economy does not grow. That would be called a recession under the most conventional definition. But I think Recession is quite a loaded word. We all get a little bit scared, particularly after the financial crisis. During the financial crisis, the economy contracted by 6%. That is a whopping amount. I think we're unlikely to see that kind of a contraction. I think what we're likely to see is a little bit of growth, maybe a little bit of contraction, and we end 2023 pretty much where we are now. One of the things we tend to see in a recession, though, is a massive rise in unemployment. So during the financial crisis, unemployment was at about 5%. We went up to about 8.5%. That, I think, is very, very unlikely this time around. Unemployment under 4%, as many job openings, vacancies right now as there are unemployed people. In fact, my lightly skilled kids have managed to get jobs. So I don't think we're going to see what we saw during the financial crisis. That doesn't mean it's not going to hurt for a lot of people.
Or even going back to the 1970s, when people have been drawing parallels to the situation in the 1970s when we did have really bad unemployment. Where does this now leave the Bank of England, who are going to be deciding on the interest rate rise tomorrow? Many people suggesting it will be a 0.5% rise as a short, sharp shock to the economy. They will actually be quite keen to have this talk of recession, because it'll damp down spending, which is what they want to happen.
To a certain extent, I think it's a very, very good question, and I think the Bank of England has to go with that 0.5-point rise. Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, who has trouble communicating effectively with the rest of us.
As he did in the FCA, some people suggest, the Financial Conduct Authority.
Don't get me started on that one, honestly, because I've always thought that he was a poor choice for the governor of the Bank of England, given the things that happened when he was the top regulator. But a couple of weeks ago at the Mansion House speech, he said 50 basis points, 0.5 percentage point, is on the table. I think that having painted himself into that corner, he's got to go ahead and do that, although he's not the only vote on a 9-member committee. But what the Bank of England has been pretty clear about is, and they'll say this, we can't affect the price of oil. We can't affect the price of food. Here's what we want. We want to make sure that people know that we're serious about inflation so that they don't ask for pay rises. Pay rises can become a vicious cycle. If you ask for a pay rise, then you have more money in your pocket. That becomes inflationary. So the Bank of England's been very clear. That's what they want to do. They want to make sure that pay isn't getting out of hand. When you look at public sector pay, it's not anywhere near getting out of hand, rising about 1.5 percentage points a year.
OK. Laurie Laird, we've got to leave it there. Always really good to get your explanations. Thank you very much indeed.
Coming up, gout. Why the diagnosis could be leading to heart attacks. We're asking Dr. Joshua more details coming up after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 8:30. Still to come on our programme this morning at 8:45. We'll be speaking to both the Sunak and the Truss camps about cyber threats delaying the Conservative Party leadership contest.
And at 9:15, a little later, the latest study finding that Chester is the most beautiful city in the world. It's beaten Rome, Venice. We'll get a tour guide to tell us what makes it so special.
And do get in touch. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Now, let's talk about gout.
Must we?
Well, you know, a bit of
important.
a sort of comedy routine about too much port, Henry VIII,
Yeah.
etc. However, gout patients who have a flare-up of symptoms are more likely, we're now being told, to suffer a heart attack or a stroke, according to a new study.
Patients with gout who have a flare-up were found to have higher odds of suffering a cardiovascular event in the months afterwards.
Well, joining us in the studio to tell us more, Dr. Joshua Woolrich. Thank you very much for joining us. And, you know, apologies to all those people who do suffer with it. It has been a little bit of a sort of carry-on joke with Henry VIII complaining about the gout, etc. But it's a serious condition. It's called by crystals getting into the joints?
Yeah, so our body breaks down something called purines, which we use to make DNA. It's an important molecule that we have in our body. Breaks it down into uric acid, which then stays in our blood and we pee it out. If that builds up too much, that uric acid can then crystallise out, and it tends to do that in the joints. Big toes, the classic one, big inflamed, red, hot big toe, can happen at the ends of the fingers, can happen in the elbows and the knees. And we've kind of treated it, or at least from a patient perspective, we've treated it as something that is difficult, it hurts, but it's not too much of a big deal. We've known for quite a while that it is related and associated with things like cardiovascular disease and strokes, whether that's directly or whether that's because people who have things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol are more likely to get gout, people who have type 2 diabetes are more likely to get gout, and they're also all more likely to get heart disease as well. So whether it's just an association, but this new study has shown that people who have a gout flare-up are then more likely to have a cardiovascular event like a heart attack or stroke. So it may not sign. Well, it may not just be the association, but it may actually be that the flare-ups themselves, potentially the inflammation that happens during those flare-ups, might then increase the risk of something happening.
Is there anything a gout sufferer can do once they're getting a flare-up to not only get rid of the symptoms, but to mitigate the chances of having a cardiovascular event?
Yeah, so the flare-up itself is usually medically managed. There's not much you can do apart from drug therapy to help with the flare-ups, and GPs can prescribe things that are really useful, both for kind of long-term management of reducing the risk, but also reducing the inflammation at the time of a flare-up. But long-term wise, there are some things that we can do if you are someone that has gout. A lot of those are food, unfortunately. So things like red meat, things like offal, so organs, kidneys, liver, some types of shellfish. We know that things like tuna and sardines, and also then shellfish like scallops and things, can also increase the risk of gout because they all contain
cheese and wine.
Yeah, but fish, oily fish is supposed to be good for us.
Exactly.
So not necessarily the case.
Well, they all contain purines, and that purine then breaks down to uric acid. So if you're someone who has a difficulty, whether that's because of a kidney issue, whether that's genetic, a lot of people who have gout, there's a genetic component to it as well. If you have a difficulty getting rid of it, then eating more food that then breaks down into uric acid might be a problem. There is obviously a balance to be had because, of course, oily fish is very good for you. And things like sardines and mackerel, even though they have really high purines, are good for your heart. So it's a toss-up.
Is it a myth, then, that the cheese and the wine and the port have anything to do with gout? It's not an illness of overindulged, perhaps overweight chaps, which is what I think probably is the taboo that surrounds it.
Why are you looking at me then?
Including you in the conversation. None of the above.
Some of that is association, but the alcohol stuff is very much something to be aware of. So alcohol is something that, again, purines, and so it breaks down. And alcohol is probably the biggest one, aside from the red meat and the shellfish, that actually is worth limiting. The cheese is debatable. So there are some studies that have shown that dairy intake can actually reduce your risk of flares, and others that have shown that maybe the fat content in the cheese might have an issue, but it's, again, there are lots of people who do lots of things for their diet and they can't change their risk of flare-ups. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but it's not all on you. We do need to help.
And how do you know it's not another sort of osteoinflammatory disease or something else? I mean,
arthritis or something.
Yeah, exactly, osteoarthritis.
Yeah, well, so gout is a type of arthritis.
Oh, right.
Arthritis is just inflammation in the joint.
Yeah.
But we find out that it's different basically. In the hospital, it's quite easy because we take a little sample. So we take a little bit of the fluid from inside the joint, and we look at it under a lab, and we see the different types of crystals.
Or whatever.
Yeah. We don't always need to do that, so not everyone's going to need a needle in the joint, but it tends to be the presentation. So a lot of the times, if it's a single red-hot big toe, that's usually not osteoarthritis. That's usually gout. But that's, again, the reason why it's really important to make sure you're in contact with your GP.
And you're holding a can of tuna and drinking a glass of water.
As you come in, onto your morning appointment, yeah.
Dr. Josh, always good to get your expertise. Thank you very much indeed for shedding some light on all of that. Right, we're going to take a break, and after that, papers.
Yes, we got Claire Muldoon and David Mellor with us. That's coming up after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Time to go through the papers one last time this morning, joined by the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and joining him is the broadcaster, Claire Muldoon. Welcome back to both of you. David, should we start with these absolutely record BP profits being announced yesterday, going up thrice to 7 billion. Households, of course, at the same time battling to pay bills?
Well, it's in most of the papers. I'm just looking at page 26 of the Mail, but you can get it everywhere. Yes, BP profits treble to 7 billion as households battle to pay fuel bills. You see, I don't mind profits being made when a legitimate entrepreneurial activity does something that is different and new and successful. But this lot are just sitting there, pumping their oil and doing what they do, and then making massive profits, which they are refusing to give back any part of to the consumer. This profits trebling has nothing to do with their skills as managers, and I just think confiscates a chunk of it.
Windfall.
Absolutely.
A lot of, the oil industry is already taxed differently from other manufacturing and other industries because of this very reason. Do you think that it is a bad idea, though, to go after them in these sorts of circumstances? A lot of arguments, aren't there, about how it would send people abroad, BP or whatever, would not want to be in Aberdeen or...
But they're not actually putting the money back in investment, are they? They've actually said they're going to have a share buyback, which indicates they've actually got, what, $3 billion spare cash.
And that's exactly what they're going to do. No, and I think it would be a sign of weakness on the part of the government not to take action, because a lot of people who believe in capitalism still see this as an insult.
Okay. I don't think you have to not believe in capitalism. I think ask anyone in the street, I keep saying this, the court of public opinion, everyone would be saying, no, come on, you've had it now. We actually accept that the government can do this. Why aren't you doing it? Give us a break.
There's another question which is maybe for our Scottish viewers. You know, Scotland was saying we've lost a lot of the revenue from the oil and gas industry because things are so bad. Clearly they aren't if you're in the refining element of it, which is where BP's saying it's making its money.
Well, exactly. But, you know, Scotland has got much, much worse weather. My mother still, you know, can put the heating on right now than we are down here. So you've got the disparity of the geographical environment of Scotland, but notwithstanding either that the oil is actually a finite resource.
Well, as the good book says, the sun shines on the righteous.
Just let that hang there for a moment.
I thought I'd have another career as a preacher, don't you think?
Talking of the righteous, children and social housing tenants, a play ban at luxury London flats. You spotted this in The Guardian, Claire.
Yeah, now this is... I've got a bane about this. We were talking about the legacy of the lions, the lionesses from Sunday, and, you know, the lack of, in inner city areas, notwithstanding the fact we're, you know, London-centric here, but all over. You know, there's a lack of green spaces. There were a lot of them are sold off to put more development for housing and other things in schools, etc. And what they've done is they've taken the ability for children to play in a green space out of the equation at all. So what's happened here at this play ban of these luxury flats? Now, luxury in inverted commas, because in 2010, I think it was, if a developer was wanting to build flats, then it had to have a proportion of social housing, which, to be honest with you, isn't that social, because it's still very expensive to try and buy into that model and that product. So what we found is that there's children that have been reported to the local authority, in this case Suffolk, because they've been playing in the corridors of these flats. People have been putting noise appropriation monitors.
Really?
Yeah, and then applying to the local authorities to say, look, they've reached the decibels that is not making it comfortable for us to live. You know, let's get a ban on this. So the parents have been notified by letters from Suffolk Local Authority to say, look, you cannot allow your children to play in the corridors. Now, as a mum of four, when mine were wee, I wouldn't have expected them to play in a corridor. You'd have taken them out to a park. But this also shows the disparity between those who have and those who haven't. And in the private sector of these Berkeley homes in Tower Bridge Court, they've got open space.
Right, so this is the key.
This is, well, it's not, it's part of the key, but the children in the social housing development area, part of it, are not allowed to use that space. And that was highlighted during lockdown as well. They were not allowed to use the space. This is Britain. We are not an underdeveloped country. Why on earth do we still have this massive amount of social disparity with our neighbours, for heaven's sake?
No ball games on the grass.
No ball games allowed.
And an intolerance of children making noise. Children are noisy.
Yeah, but
children need to play. And so I do find, you know, quite often there's a lot of, in restaurants or whatever it might be, there isn't that kind of Spanish or Italian approach to the bambinos being around. British people are often quite irritated.
I'm irritated by noisy children. I really, really am. I don't like children. I'm just putting it out there. I love my own. I love my own. And what you actually find, you know what? What you actually find is their friends adore me. It's funny. And there's headlines of me saying...
You're a much-loved figure. We all adore you.
Thank you. But also, there's papers that I've done on smacking children, etc. So that's another thing. And people have said... No, but people have said to me, we actually thought you were really, really harsh before we met you. And then we see the product. Look at your children. That's what a good spanking has done to you.
I love children. I adore them. I don't understand why people don't like them.
They need to know their place, Isabel. They need to know their place. Exactly. Exactly, Mark.
No, they can't.
They can't.
That's my point. Why not? Because we're intolerant.
OK. David, Telegraph, savings wiped out. Yet another indication that really everyone's finding it tough.
Yes, the scale. Tim Wallace, the deputy economics editor, has written a piece in which, yes, he says that 1 in 5 families have lost all of their savings as a result of all of this. And he goes through some of the likely outcomes of the present crisis of what, is stagflation, stagnation in the economy, but inflation on top of that. And it's a long time since we had to worry about stagflation. But he says, and I mean, amongst the many interesting, it's a short piece, but it's punchy. For 1.2 million families, food and energy bills alone will exceed their disposable incomes. And that's terrible, isn't it? And the economy is expected to shrink between the third quarter of this year and the first quarter of 2023 as the recovery from COVID gives way to another recession. I mean, this is, one I don't think anyone who's feeling a bit depressed should actually read this piece. We have a recession on the way, says Stephen Millard, economist at the National Institute for Economic and Social Research. We are going to see negative GDP growth for 3 quarters. Well, that's, of course, the definition of yeah, exactly. And Millard expects a total decline in output of 1%, with a fall of 0.1% this quarter, and then 0.5% in each of the next 2 quarters.
Could we say this is global,
peaking though? At 11%.
Yeah, well,
it's depressing.
The US is saying it's already eased up, isn't it? So, but I mean, this is all a bit of a pain in the backside. So there's a pain elsewhere that you've spotted in the eye.
There is, and I picked this out for our dearly beloved colleague, Mr. Eamonn Holmes, OBE. Eamonn, it's all about the treatment, love. Treatment retrains brain to ease the back pain. This is what we're saying.
So we've got to retrain Eamonn's brain?
He's on holiday, bless him. Hopefully he's having a good bit of...
Maybe that will retrain him then.
Yeah.
Well, you can persuade your brain that you haven't got pain.
Yeah.
See, I don't believe this.
Nor do I.
Yeah, it's like my friends that say to me, you can, during childbirth, think about something else. I'm sorry, but...
The only thing during childbirth and the subsequent one after the first one was me thinking, why on earth am I doing this again? But your body's got this innate ability to switch off I don't know why I'm looking at you, Mark, because you'll have no idea what it's like.
Well, I was actually taken to task for eating a lion bar when my first child was...
I'm not surprised.
Delivered.
And I hope you gave him a bit.
Keep going as well, but there we are, yes. So my wife now associates the smell of a lion bar with giving birth to a child. So there we are.
I love it.
No more lion bars.
No more lionesses then, eh? No more baby cubs.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Let's talk about Ukraine and Corbyn's getting involved now. David, what's he had to say?
I mean, it's extraordinary to think that within, only a matter of months ago, he could have been Prime Minister of this country. First of all, he's giving an interview to a pro-Hezbollah television station, and this is in Times, and he says that that lessons from Vietnam for Ukraine argued that the war had started because the US had installed a pro-Western government in Kiev. So he blames it all on America, nothing to do with democracy. But then what he effectively is saying is that we should not arm Ukraine, thereby allowing Ukraine to collapse into Russian hands, and that somehow would be good for the world and even good for Ukraine. You keep thinking to yourself, it's a fascinating interview because one name is not mentioned. Come on, what name is not mentioned? Putin. Exactly. And you think, it's really crazy, this.
Did he not actually mention in one of the parts of the interviews, though, that we should offer a sign of peace, a peace branch out to Putin and try and get him round the table to discuss, stopping the war?
Right. But you and I both know that if he had any intention of doing that, Putin, he could have already done it. And the extraordinary thing is that despite all the killing and the various massacres that go on and the vile things that happen, he isn't going to stop. He isn't going to stop.
Just before we move on to the next story, on Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, do you think he's seeing a bit of a comeback at the moment with the rise of the strikes and the power of...
Things may be bad, whether they're that bad,
about,
yes.
shadow front bench or anything, but,
Citizen
he's back
Corbyn
he's back in the headlines,
line,
he's back, in the papers again, and we've heard from him more, I would argue, in the last month
Yes, we have.
than we have done in the last
We have,
few
because
years.
that wing of the Labour Party has come more back in, because sadly it has not been a good quarter for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is a moderate and reasonable man left to his own devices. Therefore, I think anyone who believes in a democracy should want Keir Starmer to succeed.
He's trying to tread a narrow path, isn't he, to keep all the size of his party.
But I don't think he's really hacking it. Right. And what his opponents in the Labour Party will say, where is his resonance with the voter? And resonance with the vote, he's not anywhere. His resonance with the voter is not good.
A bit dull, as people have criticised him for. Now, don't drop the dead donkey, but don't drop the live donkey in this particular case.
We could have such fun with this. We could have nightmare. We've got foul play. Drop the dead donkey. This is a story that I just absolutely love, and I think it's full of Britishness, madness, and village mentality. This is Pat the Pony, who was chosen as the village mayor of the Drum-In, who loves a Guinness. But do you know what's happened? He's been reported to the local authority. The local authority have said that the pub owners, in this case it's Hannah and Kirk Petrakis, have put up a barrier or a fence round the pub so that the foal, the donkey, can actually eat, the pony can eat the grass and drink his Guinness as the mayor of the village, and the residents have complained. And they've complained that he's not allowed to, so now he's been banned by his local pub. Isn't that a shame?
So the question, why the long face?
Oh, Mark, I just set that up for you, didn't I?
It's been cancelled.
Just know you so well. It's been cancelled.
So, I mean, one imagines maybe Guinness might see a bit of an opportunity here to go in and, if that's his favourite tipple.
I think the mayor of wherever, the mayor, Guinness, mayor, Torquay, Forum, there's lots and lots of fun we can have with this. Torbay Council said they had opened a planning enforcement case. Can you believe
this?
With
the
balls?
order.
Yeah, this is the same thing. The landlord was asked for a comment but didn't in the end.
Of course, I suppose. Whoever would have thought it? You don't look amused, David.
No, I am amused. I'm just thinking that, there are animals that I used to see a lot of growing up in the country as a kid. You don't see much now. And then when you do see them, what a joy. We were messing about on just outside our place in Dorset and failed to notice while we were trying to sort out some trouble with the car. And suddenly, a donkey sticks its head in our window, goes, hee-haw. And I think, where else? Couldn't make it up.
Pretty good impression, huh?
But I think of all manner of ways to keep myself working to a great age. Being a donkey impersonator.
Well, there we go. Yes, very useful in politics, some might say. Thank you.
David Mellick, Clemeldon, always a pleasure.
Never making an ass out of anything.
Keep on coming. Thank you both very much indeed. Now, as we've been discussing in the papers and throughout the whole of the programme, the Conservative leadership contest is going to be delayed for a week, or at least the voting is. That's after GCHQ warned that cyber hackers could be interfering with members' ballots.
Well, the two candidates due to face off once more. The latest hustings tonight in Cardiff. The latest polls, if they're to be believed, of course, putting Liz Truss 34 points ahead of the rival Rishi Sunak. Joining us now to discuss all this, backer of Liz Truss, Brandon Lewis. Mr. Lewis, thank you for joining us. First of all, I have to ask you, of course, before this or after this poll, we had this situation where she had revealed this policy on public sector pay outside London. It's really backfired badly, and this perhaps, some are suggesting, puts her judgment as a future Prime Minister in question.
I don't think that's the case. Look, we've seen Rishi Sunak's team sort of flip-flop around on 9 different things in the last couple of weeks. What Liz outlined yesterday was a package around dealing with Whitehall waste. Within that was this idea around what you do with new people coming into the civil service who are working around the country. But she's been clear that we're not going to take that part of it forward. But we do need to deal with Whitehall waste because that's something that is about how we spend taxpayers' money efficiently and effectively to get the outcomes we want for citizens across the UK.
But she was clear that she wanted it, in that it was a press release that the reporters went through with a fine-tooth comb and realised that this would mean teachers, firefighters, others, nurses, even in the public sector, would also have their pay docked. How on earth was that allowed to go out when no one saw the dangers?
Well, no, look, actually, if you look at the wording of the release, what it outlined was if you were to do this across the board, but Liz was very clear, that was never the case. We were never going to be dealing with or changing the pay of people who are working in the public sector.
Then why withdraw it then?
COVID, particularly the challenges of that. What she was looking at and what was outlined and what was being looked at was what you do about new people coming into the civil service, new contracts as they come in. But Liz was clear yesterday, we're not going to take that part of the package forward, but the wider package around dealing with Whitehall waste, dealing with the fact we've seen the civil service grow by about 91,000 over the last couple of years is something the government does need to deal with. The current Prime Minister's been clear about that. The Treasury have tasked all of us, I was tasked as a Secretary of State to deal with that within our department. So we do need to do that. As
So why withdraw it?
Taxpayers' money efficiently and effectively.
Why withdraw it then?
Because as I say, as Liz said, we're not going to take that part of the package forward. She wants to focus on dealing with how we grow the economy, deal with how we put more money in people's pockets quickly, not waiting 7 years and seeing what happens.
So it was a waste of time, a waste of effort then?
Well, the wider package, as I say, around dealing with waste in Whitehall and making sure we're spending taxpayers' money efficiently and effectively, I think is important. It's something she does want to take forward. But she's also been outlining over the last few days her determination to deliver for farming, her experience at DEFRA, making sure that we can have food security here in the UK, set our farmers free, deliver an improved educational offer for our students across the country. One of the things we should be building on the excellent work that's been done over the last few years, because that's how you see real levelling up, the ability to benefit from educational opportunities, to benefit from the jobs of the future as they are developed. And I've seen that in my own constituency, and I want to see more of that across the country, as does Liz as Prime Minister.
Brandon Lewis, I want to ask you about this poll. We've been talking about it, very much looking favourable for your candidate, for Liz Truss. But, of course, this poll was taken by YouGov before what's been described as her worst day of the campaign yet, with Rishi's team saying the lady is for turning and calling it austerity on steroids. And it's also before this mishap with the ballots. And I want to ask you, in your capacity as a former party chairman as well, exactly what this means in terms of the voting process. GCHQ saying that hostile threats were of concern and delaying the voting by a week. Could that give some extra time to Rishi's camp, play into his hands?
Well, look, we've seen a consistent lead for Liz over the period, and actually going over a very long period of time in different polling by different organisations for Liz's position in the Cabinet, but actually obviously during the leadership campaign. But there is only one poll that actually counts, and that's the poll of party members, the votes that party members like myself and others will cast over the next few days as those come out. Look, I don't know the details of obviously what's been happening in CCHQ, but I do think that it's their credit that they've made sure that we've got a process that is secure. We've got to make sure it is, and I think it's good that they've done that. Members will get their ballot papers over the next few days. They will vote, and we'll know the result of that in early September. Look, as I say, one of the things I think has been interesting is Liz has been pretty consistent about and very clear about wanting to see an ambitious, different approach to our economy, putting more money in people's pockets, growing the economy, helping businesses, particularly SMEs, to grow. What we've seen from the other side is a whole range of 9 different areas they've flip-flopped around. But look, the focus has got to be for us on giving people positive reasons to vote, to go out and vote for the next leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. My argument is that should be Liz Truss, because of what she wants to do for our country, how she will stand up for our country and take it forward in a positive way.
Mr. Lewis, shouldn't the focus actually be on Ukraine, on Taiwan? She is the Foreign Secretary. She's missing in action in Dorset, Cardiff tonight. These are not matters really that are forefront for Britain at the moment.
Well, actually, as Foreign Secretary, I would say that Liz has actually shown great strength of character on these issues. She was out there with the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary very, very early on, before many other of our partners around the world even, standing up for Ukraine and arguing to support and defend Ukraine in a way that we have done. I saw that firsthand as Northern Ireland Secretary, because the NLAWs are produced
yes,
in
but
Belfast,
we know that. What about the current
strong
situation?
for the UK in areas... Well, Well, Ukraine still is a current situation. She has continued to take a firm approach to that. She's actually shown her ability as Foreign Secretary to be able to do that whilst challenging the EU in difficult, controversial areas like the Northern Ireland Protocol. She has been clear on a strong position around China and support for Taiwan. She was clear about that with the Foreign Affairs Select Committee just a short while ago.
Can we actually afford this leadership campaign,
going through this campaign process?
Yeah. Can we afford this leadership campaign at the moment when there's such pressing issues?
Well, the reality is we have a leadership campaign. It is right that she is out there explaining to our members what she stands for. They've got to make that decision about who they're going to support. I hope they'll support Liz. But that doesn't move away from the fact she is still continuing to do her work as Foreign Secretary and standing up for the UK. That's actually, I would say, a testament to the fortitude, strength and the energy that Liz has got, that she can continue to do both those things. And let's be clear, as Prime Minister, you are always dealing with a whole plethora of things across the entire domestic and international agenda, and she's shown she can do that.
Just finally, I just want to ask you about the warnings from the Chinese ambassador to the UK, saying that a British politician should think very carefully if they were to follow in the footsteps of Nancy Pelosi and visit Taiwan, saying that there would be serious and severe consequences. Can you foresee a situation in which a British politician, or indeed Liz Truss herself, might make that trip?
Well, look, none of us know quite what the future holds for us. So we've got to see what happens over the next few weeks about what position we're all in. Liz, as Foreign Secretary, has always been strong about the defence of Taiwan. As I say, she made that point a short while ago, actually, to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. I think it is right that we continue to stand up for and defend sovereign and free democratic nations like Ukraine, and stand up for places like Taiwan. And we shouldn't be fearful of standing up for what is right against difficult regimes like Putin's regime, and being aware and alert to the challenges of somewhere like China as well. And I think Liz's track record on that is a strong one, and it's, again, another reason why she's the right person to lead our country.
Mr. Lewis, thank you very much indeed for giving us your time there at Westminster. Thanks. And just to, of course, reassure you that we'll be speaking to the Rishi Sunak camp, the former Chancellor, and if he's got any chance to catch up with Liz Truss.
Yes, very excitingly, we have managed to secure a special day next week, the 10th of August, for the People's Forum, where Liz Truss will be joined by Alistair Stewart in Lee, just outside Manchester, for that event. And also, I can tell you that Rishi Sunak has agreed to an interview with GB News, which will be broadcast on Saturday.
Hurrah!
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The threat of cyber attacks that's delayed voting for our next Prime Minister.
Good morning. It's just after 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 3rd of August. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel and Mark. Here's what's leading our news this morning.
Well, voting in the Conservative leadership race delayed by more than a week. It's after GCHQ, our spy masters, warned that cyber attacks could affect the voting system. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will face off in another hustings tonight in Cardiff.
The first grain shipment to leave Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion has anchored off the coast of Istanbul, raising hopes for an easing of the global food crisis.
US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has spoken to the Taiwanese parliament, describing the nation as one of the freest societies in the world, but China's responded to her visit by announcing large-scale military drills and missile tests.
And as ever, you can get involved in our conversations this morning. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can use Twitter @gbnews. Now, the race for the leader of the Tory party continues with another hustings to be held in Cardiff tonight. Meanwhile, security issues caused a delay in delivering the ballot papers for the leadership election.
And the latest poll by YouGov and The Times has put Liz Truss a massive 34 points ahead of rival Rishi Sunak. So is the former Chancellor's campaign all but finished? Let's speak now to one of his supporters, MP Faye Jones. I mean, Faye, I guess we ought to reflect that this poll was before, this mess that Liz Truss got into over the pay conditions for civil servants and others outside Westminster.
Yeah, morning both. Hi. Well, there's a lot of polls flying around at the moment. I saw one just the other day that said that Rishi was just 5 points behind, and then there was another poll that said he's leading with Conservative councillors, which turned out to be the only poll that was accurate back in 2019 when we last had a leadership election. So there's tons of numbers flying around, but really today is a really exciting day for me because we have our hustings down in Cardiff, where both candidates will answer questions from members in Wales. And that is what I am hugely looking forward to. I want a Prime Minister who is going to value Wales, respect Wales, work closely with the Welsh Government, put an end to some of their crazier policies. So I'm really looking forward to what happens this evening. And the only poll that matters is the one that we hear the results of on September the 5th.
Yeah, and look, Rishi Sunak will need to do a lot to make up that ground if the YouGov poll is to be believed. And hopefully he will be trying to make capital, one would assume, from your point of view, on, as Mark described it, as the mess being made by Liz Truss yesterday. And also the fact that there's been this delay to voting by a week following on the concerns of possible hacking that GCHQ have flagged. Now, that could really play into Rishi Sunak's hands.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that yesterday's poll really does not reflect the experience that I'm having at the moment in talking to members across the country. Things are much, much tighter. A lot of undecideds out there as well. And as soon as I talk them through Rishi's plans, I'm finding a lot of voters swinging towards us. So, I think there's all to play for. We're fighting for every single vote. I do think this contest is going to be quite tight. And just on the security, I think it's really important that CCHQ takes the security of this process incredibly seriously. So I'm pleased there's just a short delay, but it doesn't affect the timing of the result.
Bigger picture, you are MP for Brecon and Radnorshire. It's not just about, of course, the party leadership, it's about a new Prime Minister. Are you really likely to make inroads with Labour and Plaid in Wales, given the economic circumstances at the moment?
Well, I think so. Rishi has the track record, having stewarded the economy through the pandemic, wrapped his arms around millions of people in this country with the furlough scheme. 11,000 jobs in my constituency were saved because of the furlough scheme that Rishi designed. And my constituents do recognise that. And we had a hustings just a couple of weeks ago, organised by the Conservative Union Research Group. And Rishi was clearly the winner of that debate because he knew far more about Wales, to put it bluntly. You know, he was really concerned about some of the policies that the Welsh government is putting together with support from Plaid Cymru. So I think the fact that he is much more well-versed, much more aware of what goes on in Wales, he also has a lot more MPs and members of the Welsh Parliament backing him. So I think, you know, personally, in terms of what my constituents are looking for, they are looking for a leader who's going to be able to take the fight to Labour and to Plaid and to the Liberal Democrats, and that's Rishi.
Heavily criticised for his involvement in bringing down Boris Johnson. Lots of people seeing him as disloyal. Lots of people saying that has been the fatal problem for him in his leadership campaign. But he has always defended it as a matter of integrity, and he's said that he is guided by that very much. I wonder whether or not his conscience will be pricked at all, given the stuff that we've been talking about all morning in terms of the international concerns at the moment, the fact that there are problems going on in Ukraine, there are problems going on in Taiwan.
And there's no government.
There's no government. The Prime
say.
Minister off on holiday and the Foreign Secretary at hustings tonight. Given that his campaign is stalling, is there a moral argument that perhaps he should look at himself and say, perhaps I should allow a coronation of Liz Truss and let government start to function and the country be guided through these difficult times?
Well, I think that would be denying Conservative Party members something that they deserve, quite frankly. I think we've done that in the past and it hasn't worked. The last thing I want is for us to be here in another few years' time. We need to elect not just a leader, but a Prime Minister. And, you know, I think of all of the candidates that we have had throughout this long race, there is no one who can match Rishi for his integrity. And I really do believe that. I also couldn't serve in government during that period in early July. I also stepped down. And, you know, like all of us, I was really proud to support Boris Johnson and as Prime Minister. He achieved a huge amount. And Rishi has talked quite consistently about everything that he achieved as part of the Prime Minister's government. But we reached a point where the situation became untenable and something had to be done. I respect Rishi for putting his principles before his career. And I think, you know, that's the mark of the man. He will say something that is difficult because he thinks it's more important to be honest than to get you on side. You know, I think that is what we need from a leader. We need someone who is going to be upfront about the massive challenges we face, whether they're economic or foreign policy. We need someone to be clear and straightforward with us, and someone who will say something that is unpopular, but it's what we need to hear. I think, you know, let's not go for someone who promises you the moon on a stick. Let's go for someone who is honest, upfront, and prepared to face the challenges that are coming towards us.
Faye Jones, thank you very much. And for our Welsh viewers, diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Very impressive.
Croeso, diolch.
Diolch i chi. I was totally Welsh spoken until the age of 6.
Wow.
Yes, I went to the same school in Llanelli as a certain Hugh Edwards.
Right.
Yes,
a proud Welsh speaker.
Indeed, Ysgol Dewi Sant. There we go. So thumbs up to them if they're watching this morning.
Fantastic. Oh, look, let's get some reaction to that from Norman Baker. He's been looking through the top stories of the day. Speaking Welsh, one of your many skills?
I'm afraid not. No, I was born in Scotland, so I could do a Scottish accent.
And nearly a tartan jacket as well.
Well, yes,
is that the Baker tartan?
It is now.
First of all, your reaction to that interview and your thoughts on Faye Jones's defence of Rishi Sunak?
Well, Faye was doing her best to defend Rishi. And I mean, I think it's very unfair that he's been accused of stabbing Boris Johnson in the back. I mean, to be honest with you, Boris Johnson, if it's not impossible, stabbed himself in the back, I think, by the way he behaved. Let's face it, 50-odd ministers resigned. It wasn't just Rishi, it was a whole lot of them. So,
but it's thought that it was the second resignation, the timing of it so quickly after Sajid Javid.
We've forgotten all about Sajid Javid, haven't we?
We have forgotten about Sajid Javid.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to land it on him. I think, you know, Boris resigned because Boris was forced out by his own party, let's face it.
But unfair though it might be, do you think it is the reason that he is now trailing 34 points behind Liz Truss, or is it just because,
or is he?
as Faye was saying...
No, or is he? No, I think it's deeper than that. I think actually what's happened is that the two candidates have decided to appeal to their electorate now, which is not the wider electorate, it's the electorate of the 0.3% of the population that's a Tory party membership, who are by and large quite well off, by and large live in the south, by and large elderly, and by and large quite right-wing. And the policies coming out are designed to please that coterie of people, not necessarily please the electorate as a whole. And the danger, and Rishi's problem, I think, has been that he's he's caved into that. He's now trying to emulate Liz Truss on
the
things like
red meat
taxation.
policies, as they
yes,
describe
exactly.
them. Yeah.
I don't think he believes this stuff he says half the time
Well,
about
which one's
tax.
specific? I mean, the taxation ones he was defending, saying he would only bring in tax cuts once inflation was under control.
Well, he did
the
do
big
that.
caveat that would be in 7 years' time, which even if he won and became Prime Minister at a general election, he probably wouldn't be.
Well, he did the VAT, U-turn on VAT, didn't he, on heating, for one thing. He's been talking about attacking woke policies. I don't believe that's his priority. He's saying that because he thinks it will appeal to the Tory membership. Rishi would have been better, in my view, on day one and saying, this is the new Conservative Party which I want to present, and it's very different to the one which Liz Truss is presenting, and actually make a case for what I think he actually believes in. But he hasn't done that, so he's weakened his own case. There's a very good piece in the Eye by Ian Berrell, which made that case very strongly, which I was very taken by the other day. Anyway, as far as Faye is concerned, she did her best to defend him. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and as you've indicated, it's not just a leadership election. This is going to be the new Prime Minister. And is the problem for the general electorate that they don't actually know what the Tory party is? That, there was no Johnsonism such as we remember from Thatcherism. It was a cult of personality, populist politics. But, what do they stand for? That's
well, I mean, under Boris Johnson, they were a kind of English nationalist party, I think was how Chris Patten, the former Tory minister, described it. But I don't think people know what it stands for. I don't think they know what the Labour Party stands for, actually, as a matter of fact, either. So we're in this curious situation where people are excluded from the election going on and observing it from a distance without knowing really what the election is going to produce. So it's not very satisfactory. I come from Lewis, and in 1265 we had the Battle of Lewis, which famously limited the power of the king, Simon de Montfort, and the barons then took over some control. The barons are probably 0.3% of the population in those days, not very different to the populations of the Tory electorate. So we haven't come very far in 800 years, have we?
The Barons' Party. Well, there's a thought, yes.
Can we talk about the other big stories of the day that we've been covering? And we've been leading with this ray of sunshine, this little bit of hope coming through that ship from Odessa, finally reaching Istanbul with 26,000 tonnes of corn.
Well, that's obviously good news, but I mean, it's only the first of many, and there's a huge amount of grain left in Ukraine, and of course the harvest this year has been affected badly by the war, so they won't be producing as much grain as they would have done even if we finished the war tomorrow. There's going to be a shortage of grain. This is very serious for African countries in particular, but it's also affecting the cost of living in this country and across the West as well.
Where would you be on this idea of sending NATO maritime naval forces into the Black Sea to ensure that this safe passage is maintained? Because clearly that could be a flashpoint.
Well, it could be a flashpoint, and it could be a worse flashpoint if we do that, actually. I mean, I think if we can get an agreement, which the UN sort of has,
through Turkey.
Yes, through Turkey, to get grain out without raising the temperature further, then that's probably a good idea.
What about if there was sort of air support rather than boat support, as it were? Would that make it better? That was what Alexei Goroshenko was calling for this morning.
Well,
maritime patrols.
Yes, I'd like to. Well, what we have been doing in the West has been arming Ukraine and giving them Western weapons, which are superior by and large to Russian weapons. And it's possible the air control and the maritime control could come via the Ukrainians, but via Western weapons. And that's probably a safer route rather than bringing in NATO indirectly.
What do you make of Jeremy Corbyn's assessment of the Ukrainian situation at the moment?
Well, it's incredible. I mean, I listened to David Mellor a few moments ago. I happen to agree with David on that. I mean, the consequence of what Corbyn was saying was to say, let's cave in, let's abandon the Ukrainians who were overrun by the Russians. Because, that's obviously what would happen. Unless Jeremy really thinks that Putin will say, well, that's a very nice gesture, I'll sit down with you as a gentleman to gentleman and negotiate something. No, he won't. I mean, the man's a psychopath. So he's not going to give in. He has to be stopped militarily,
and what happened to self-determination?
Well, indeed. And the self-determination in Ukraine, which they have a right to. Why shouldn't they have a right to determination in their own country? Same, by the way, is Taiwan.
Well, I wanted to bring that up, this trip from Pelosi. Lots of people saying incredibly brave of her. Or do you think it could be inflammatory, or both?
Well, it's both.
Yeah.
But, I mean, look, I've got very little time for the Chinese government, and I've spent some years as president of Tibet Society, and also I've seen what's happened to the Uyghurs with whom I'm in contact. And the fact of the matter is the Chinese government is just beyond the pale in all sorts of ways. They say we want one nation. Well, they also say they want to respect national boundaries. They should respect Taiwan's boundaries, because they're an independent nation. It had been since 1949.
And is this to do with Xi trying to cement his position up for a third term, of course, that he sees this, you know, he wants to be the new Mao, some have said?
It's partly that, and he's certainly taking on more powers than anyone since Mao. Yeah. But also, I mean, the Chinese government... I mean, I was in Beijing, I met the Chinese when I was a minister, and the way the meeting was structured was not dissimilar to how it would have been under the term of the emperor. I mean,
really?
the same layout, the same procedure, the same protocol as it would have been back in those days. And I think they've got this mindset going back to, you know, the 19th century, that they want to include Taiwan and Tibet as one country. Well, Taiwan didn't want to be part of that country, and Tibet was an independent country until 1959, until the Chinese invaded. We know that. The UK signed treaties with Tibet, independent treaties, which the Chinese were not part of. And so the Chinese pretending that Tibet's part of China is simply wrong. So this one China thing is just an excuse for annexation of independent countries.
Norman, it's always great to get your thoughts on the big stories of the day. Thank you very much for that. Just one quick final question. The most beautiful city in the world, if I had to make you choose, what would it be?
Lewis.
Oh, Aberdeen, because I come from there.
Aberdeen. Here we go, in the world.
I'm going there next week. But listen,
Right.
can I have 5 seconds on this?
Go on, you can have 5.
This is great. This is the front page of the Eye. Look at this. 8 women on the front page. 6 from the English football team, Liz Truss, and this female comedian. How long ago would it have been you wouldn't have seen 8 women on the front page? It would be men, wouldn't it, all the way through? Society's changing, helpfully.
Yeah. Interesting point.
I'm glad I gave you that extra 5 seconds there. Norman, thank you so much.
So, talking about Aberdeen, let's talk about somewhere else.
Yeah, Chester has scientifically been found to be the most beautiful city in the world. Whether or not you agree, let us know your thoughts. We'll be talking about it after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. And the study that has revealed Chester is the most beautiful city in the world.
Yeah, unbelievable. Researchers say it has the highest percentage of buildings that align with the golden ratio, which was then used as a guide to rate each city.
Venice only second, London third. Where's Rome? Well, let's speak now to a tour guide for Chester and the cathedral there for more than 30 years, Nick Fry. Nick, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, tell us all about Chester. Fly the flag for the city.
Goodness me. Well, first of all, good morning and welcome to the ancient and loyal city of Chester. We've got 2,000 years of history here. We've got layer upon layer upon layer of history, just waiting for people to come and discover. And of course, each period of time has lent something to the city. And that's why people who live here think it's such a beautiful and extraordinary place, full of unique things, oldest things, whole list of superlatives, basically.
GB News, and it's always wonderful to be patriotic, and I'm delighted that Chester came top of this. But when we think of the competition of any city in the world, and when I think of Rome, to me Rome is probably the most beautiful city in the world. And I think of the Sistine Chapel and the Vatican and all the the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps. I mean, it's got so many iconic landmarks there. You can see the Colosseum. It's hard to understand how Chester, beautiful though it is, has beaten cities like this. What do you think it is that made it clinch the deal?
Well, I think it's been worked out on what you might call a fairly scientific basis, this golden ratio system, which is a mathematical way of working out beauty. But of course, you can't really work out beauty in that way, because beauty, needless to say, is in the eye of the beholder. So everybody will have a different slant on what's beautiful, I suppose. We think Chester's beautiful. We want people to come and see it. But it doesn't mean to say that other places aren't as attractive as well.
Yeah, and you've made the point that you're accessible 2.5 hours from Euston, when the trains are running, of course. That's the other aspect, that we can get to you perhaps a little easier than Rome or Venice at the moment.
Chester is very accessible. It's only 2 hours and 5 minutes from Euston, by the way.
Right, I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just at the end of a train line from London. We're in a very wonderfully placed with regard to the motorway system. We're halfway up on the west coast of the country, so it's a very easy place to get to, well served by roads and rails, and we have 2 airports, of course, Manchester and Liverpool as well.
OK, and what's your favourite thing, would you say, about Chester? Probably the cathedral, I'm guessing, given that you've been a tour guide there, or if there was one thing that people had to make a beeline towards, what would it be?
I suppose it would be the cathedral. It lies in the centre of the city. Been there for 1,000 years, and it's just an extraordinary place. There are things there which are exceptional. We have the best wood carving in the country, for instance, amazing medieval wood carving, but that just lies at the centre of this extraordinary 2,000-year-old city, full of things to come and see.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it, to see the non-obvious winners coming out on top. It's so fantastic. Nick Fry, Chester Green Badge Tour Guide, lovely to get your thoughts this morning. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Oh, there we go. I'm going to have to go and
visit. A very
visit.
impressive back little courtyard garden there in Chester as well.
Gorgeous. We're going to have to get Chester on our backdrop behind us there. But thank you very much for your company this morning. Let us know your favourite city. I'll be back tomorrow bright and early from 6 with Stephen Dixon.
I won't, because I'm doing On the Money tomorrow. But next, we've got the briefing coming up with Tom, and a very special interview too with Tobias Elwood. Stay with us for that.
Have a great day.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's a gloomy start for many of us with some rain, but brighter skies are on their way later. Those brighter skies are to the north of a cold front which is currently crossing England and Wales. Along that cold front, thick and low cloud with some early rain. But as the cold front pushes through, brighter skies will appear and a scattering of showers. So a grey start to the day for southern parts of England. The rain clearing southwest England, South Wales in the next few hours, and then that pushes into central and southern parts of England. It turns to showers, I think, and it doesn't quite reach the far southeast, where it does stay dry with increasingly sunny skies later, and the skies brighten across much of the country, but there will be a further showery pulse of rain across much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Temperatures at around average in the north, high teens, low 20s. Further south, 23 or 24 for Cardiff and Exeter, but 28 Celsius for London. And then overnight, clear spells for much of England and Wales. A few more showers coming along for North Wales for a time and North England. But most of the showers will affect Scotland, and some longer spells of rain will cross the country through the night. 11 to 14 Celsius for Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland. 15 or 16 for much of England and Wales, and here it will be a warm start to the day with plenty of sunshine first thing, staying dry for the southern third of the UK with a mixture